Chapter 1. A Shooting Star and a Wish. In a small room, in the center of a star, in solar system of little renown, a slightly chubby man was lying in bed with his feet up in the air. As he stared at his toes unknowingly, his mind wandered through his memories of any time he even remotely did something interesting. He had changed his position multiple times, and although with his cultivation it was impossible for him to get cramps, he did his best to find the most uncomfortable position possible so that in the unlikely chance he finally did get a cramp, at least something relatively interesting would have happened to him. This young, unkempt man was barely 12 Elysian cycles old and was already one of the most promising treasure manufacturers on the Elysian network. As such, he was entrusted with the task of manufacturing an incredibly strong and extremely rare treasure. To speed up the treasure manufacturing process, his client even provided him with access to Proto's energy from a newly formed universe, and even paid a premium to ensure no one else could enter this new universe for almost half an Elysian cycle. That is how this young, bored out of his mind crampless man found himself all alone working the longest single stretch yet in his life. To put it in perspective, he has been working non-stop for 14 billion Earth years. About 1.5 billion years ago he finished setting up the foundation of the treasure, which meant that his remaining work, although important, did not require as much attention from him. As long as he was within a certain range, he could continue manufacturing using only his spiritual senses. This left him relatively free to do as he wished, but being alone he got bored quickly. He had devised many ways to entertain himself. His latest and greatest idea was to manufacture multiple treasures with abundant spiritual energy until they formed their own souls. Then he set many restrictions on these spiritual treasures and made sure he could always monitor them, as well as provided them with ingrained tasks. He called them systems. Finally, he released the systems out into the vast universe. Now all he needed to do was wait for some of the inhabitants of this universe to find them, and his entertainment could begin. The man repositioned himself with his back against the wall, using only the side of his head and shoulder as support. All he needed to do now was wait. On Earth, in New York City, at midnight in Chelsea Waterside Park, a young man was sitting and staring out at the night sky in melancholy. He was exhausted not physically but mentally. From an outsider's point of view, his life was going pretty great. He graduated from college early with honors and had gotten a job right out of the bat. In his spare time he made small video games, and he only treated that as a hobby until some random online streamer uploaded a viral video raging at how horrible the mechanics of his game were. That caused more people to do the same. In the short span of 4 days wherein he was not even paying attention to his game, its sales had skyrocketed, and out of nowhere he'd suddenly made a pretty penny. Then, a gaming company offered to buy it, and he ended up selling it for a little over $7 million. Yes, from an outsider's view his life was going great. To be honest, even he himself had to admit that there was nothing he could complain about, but regardless he was bored with life. Socializing with friends bored him. His career bored him. He took up a few hobbies to try and find something interesting to do, but nothing worked. He reminisced about his days as a kid when everything was filled with wonder and everything excited him. Playing was exciting, getting new clothes was exciting, meeting friends was exciting, even something as mundane as not losing a pencil till it was completely used up was exciting. Lex let out a deep sigh before getting up. It was getting late and there was no point staying out. He looked at the night sky one last time before returning, and saw a shooting star. Wish something fun would come my way, he mumbled and left. He had made the wish ironically since he did not believe in shooting stars granting wishes. But whether it was coincidence or fate, the shooting star turned its direction and flew towards Lex faster than made sense. The shooting star did not seem to suffer from any atmospheric drag, and made no sound as it approached Lex, so he was caught completely unaware when something hit him in the back of his head and knocked him out. When he awoke, groggy and confused, he heard a sound in his head. Assimilation complete. Launching system. Welcome to Midnight Inn. Host designation: The Innkeeper. Chapter 2. YouTube History. The voice was loud and extremely clear. It jolted Lex awake from his somnolent state and found that he had been lying on the sidewalk all night. Rubbing his aching head he looked around but could not find who had been speaking to him. He quickly dismissed the voice from his mind and ventured towards home in slight alarm. He couldn't quite remember what he was doing last, but he was sure that he had no intentions of taking a nap on the sidewalk, and he couldn't help but think of all the diseases or ailments that would cause him to pass out. Did he have some kind of seizure? That was not the kind of excitement he was looking for in life. When he reached back his apartment he quickly went to the bathroom and undressed to observe his condition. A few slight bruises on his body suggested that he had fallen quite abruptly and quite hard on the floor when he passed out. I apologize for that. Lex heard a voice in his head, and before him appeared a tiny floating woman who looked incredibly like the heroine from the Spider-Man movie. There really is no safe way for assimilation designed in your body. A major design flaw in my opinion. What? Lex yelled in alarm and fell backwards. He stared at the tiny floating woman in shock. He was not scared, but the appearance of a tiny floating woman had given him quite the jump scare. Oh dear, the host acclimation manual had something about reactions like this. Let me see. Yes, a self-introduction is necessary. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the augmented reality avatar provided by the Midnight Inn for your acclimation. During the assimilation process between the Midnight Inn system and yourself, an analysis of your memories provided the template to define the best interaction method, with the greatest ease of use, between yourself and the Midnight Inn. The scan showed a recent increase in your fondness of novels with a system therefore that is template that was chosen for assimilation. The scan also showed that you have the greatest affinity for this female character, and thus the avatar was created with her as a model. This is an irreversible process. In summary, you now have a system and I am its avatar. You may ask any related questions to me. Lex, who was on the bathroom floor shirtless, stared up at the tiny floating woman with his jaw dropped. It took him a few moments to process everything she had and mumbled to himself, "Am I going crazy?" "I'm sorry," the floating woman replied. "I meant you can ask me questions related to the Midnight Inn. I do not have a grasp of your mental faculties. Would you like me to pull up your status for you to review?" Lex stared at the floating woman with the feeling that he had been made fun of. He picked himself and dusted himself off, his face expressionless. He walked to the kitchen wherein he pulled out a box of apple juice and poured himself some. He sat down comfortably on a sofa and stared at the floating woman for some time, slowly sipping his juice in the meantime. His thoughts were hidden, or so he imagined as his expressions changed from time to time while lost in thought. Sometimes he stared at the floating woman with a serious frown, sometimes with a quirky smile, and sometimes he dazed off lot in his thoughts. "What does the system do?" he finally asked, pulling himself together. The Midnight Inn is a universal establishment that provides accommodation, sustenance, entertainment, safety, and other facilities to those who wish to avail them. The universe is a dangerous place, but also a prosperous one, and the clients for Midnight Inn are various, from weary travelers to adventurers, from those who are lost to those who seek change. The Midnight Inn is the most renowned universal hoteling establishment in the entire universe. Please note, currently Midnight Inn is the only universal hoteling establishment in this universe. Lex felt like facepalming when he heard that last statement. So basically you want me to manage a hotel for the travelers of the universe? I guess that goes without saying, but does that mean there are aliens? He asked. That is correct, the floating woman replied with excitement. But there is much more to it than that. Midnight Inn will have many more features and amenities as your authority goes up. Currently the Midnight Inn has no physical existence and it will be up to you to develop it. You will be guided through quests on how to level up. Lex sipped his apple juice as he processed everything he was just told. There was a small part of his that thought he was suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or something. He'd never studied medicine, so he wasn't clear on what those diseases were or how they presented, but the gist of it was he thought he might have gone crazy. But for the most part he believed what the floating woman told him, and even if he was going crazy there wasn't much he could do about it now. Best to enjoy what he could before someone locked him up in an insane asylum. So what do I call you? Or do you also go by Midnight Inn? You may call me Mary Jane, or Mary for short, taken from your memories as a part of your first childhood crush. Only your establishment and the system are named as Midnight Inn, named after the time when you first encountered the system. Lex blushed slightly in embarrassment. Wasn't this taking naming too arbitrarily? But with the naming convention of system novels which followed trends, such as Little Black and Little White, he wasn't too surprised. All right, Mary, he said the name hesitantly. Where did the system come from? Why did it choose me? As of right now your authority is insufficient to know the origin for the system. As for why you were chosen, a thorough analysis of various factors such as IQ, luck, competency, etc. throughout your world caused the system to momentarily lag, during which the system crashed into you and initiated assimilation. Mary blushed as she told the details and looked up at the ceiling as if the world's most beautiful painting were upon it. Lex face-bombed. It was better not to dwell on these philosophical questions such as why. What's important is that the system is here now. Can anyone else see you? He asked. No, as of yet you have not unlocked projection capability. However, it is a possibility. Furthermore, no one can hear me either, and you can communicate with me through your thoughts, and can give me complex orders to carry out while you may be focused on other real-time tasks. I can only help with tasks related to the Midnight Inn. After a moment of thinking whether Lex had any other questions he might want to ask, he said, All right, time to get to business then. Show me my status panel. With pleasure, replied Mary and waved her, and a panel appeared hovering in front of him. Name, Lex Williams. Age, 23. Sex, male. Cultivation level, moral health, suboptimal developing brain tumor, damaged muscles, damaged joints, weakened digestive system, weakened lungs, weakened heart, mild nicotine addiction. Select to display full list. Midnight points. 0 Midnight in level. 0 Inventory. Starter pack quest. Open starter pack. Remark: your YouTube history is more embarrassing than your internet search history. Chapter 3. Will there be pancakes? Brain tumor. Lex exclaimed in shock. Yes, Mary responded. According to a full body scan, you have a developing brain tumor which has been interfering with your normal brain chemistry. According to my deduction, this is what has been primarily responsible for your demotivated state for the last 8 months. Other than this, your body is suffering from various minor ailments as a result of poor diet, lack of exercise, and other environmental factors. However, this is not a reason for concern. Although the technology on your planet is not able to provide you treatment without inconvenience, in the universe this is but a mild issue. In fact, in some developed galactic civilizations this is not even considered a medical issue, as normal foods and drinks in those civilizations can resolve this issue. Actually, simply elevating your cultivation level can also cure you of it. Lex was relieved to hear Mary, but suddenly he was incredibly motivated to start the Midnight Inn. Although Mary said it was not a reason for alarm, he was incredibly alarmed. Open the starter pack. Starter pack opening. Starter pack opened. You have received initial building permit 5,000 square feet. 2-story Midnight Inn design interface, host attire 2 AI 1 month lease certificate. Fancy monocle universal language converter, bathroom slippers, self-defense butter knife, 3 golden tickets, 500 midnight points. Lex got 10 items from the pack, and though he was still mostly filled with anxiety, a tinge of excitement crept in. He selected the items to look at their details. Initial building permit. A permit that allows hosts to design Midnight Inn building and layout without spending any midnight points. Decor and design options are limited, and the final blueprint must contain 1 boundary wall, 1 lobby, 1 eatery, 1 lounge, 3 guest rooms, and an outdoor seating area. The building can have 1 additional level after ground level. Midnight Inn design interface. Once the inn has been established, all expansion, renovation, and redecoration must be done manually by host. The interface will allow host to carry out those functions at the cost of midnight points. Host attire. The Midnight Inn has many functions and features which can be seamlessly used by host when wearing host attire within the premises of the inn. Using these functions otherwise would have to be carried out manually step by step through the system by host. Please note, the host attire also carries a design feature, so its appearance can be altered according to the theme of the inn, and also has an invulnerable feature, meaning it cannot take damage. Please note, the attire does not serve as a defense item for the host. Please note, to protect the host's identity, the attire contains the Clark Kent effect, meaning guests who have seen the host in the attire will not recognize him if they meet him outside the inn. The attire cannot leave inn property. 2 AI 1 month lease certificate. Running an establishment requires a large staff with various skills. This certificate will allow the user to rent 2 highly skilled and competent AI that will follow the host's demands. The host will have to make other arrangement for when the certificate expires. Fancy monocle. The prestige of the inn is carried by the host. The host will be expected to encounter various types of clients and situations and may need help identifying different items or materials. Note, the monocle's database is empty and must be filled by the host. The database can be filled by manually entering data, reading new data while having the monocle equipped, or connecting it to another database. The monocle can retrieve data from any format. Universal language converter. A small device that analyzes language based on various factors. It can be attached onto the host as a tattoo behind an ear and can translate to and for host in real time. The host will hear everything in English and others will hear the host in their native language. Bathroom slippers. Entering different areas requires different kinds of preparation. Equip the bathroom slippers while leaving the inn in foreign environments to protect yourself from hazardous environments. Note, the slipper only provides protection from environment and does not act as a defensive item. Self-defense butter knife. The universe is a dangerous place and not all guests come with honest intentions. The self-defense butter knife can be used to instantly kill all beings Foundation realm and below. The butter knife carries a secondary function of intimidation, which is to let others think the host is so strong he can kill with a simple butter knife. The butter knife carries a tertiary function, which is that beings on overnaxant realm will appreciate the host's choice at cutlery and will think of it as an actual butter knife. The butter knife cannot leave the inn. The butter knife can be upgraded. Please increase authority for instructions on how to upgrade the butter knife. 3 golden tickets. The physical location of the inn is a secret, but its doors can be opened from anywhere. With a golden ticket, the host can choose a world where entrances to the inn can spawn randomly. 500 midnight points. The host opened a starter pack, not a nanny pack. Please use the points in the midnight store to solve all miscellaneous issues. Quest update. Quest complete. The host is rewarded with nothing. Remarks: you don't get rewards for doing something as basic as breathing. New quest: develop the Midnight Inn. Lex raised an eyebrow at the sassy attitude of the system, but ignored it. Reading the details for each item, his attention was brought to something he had just overlooked. What are the cultivation levels? He asked, although he had some basic idea. In the vast universe exist many kinds of life forms, each with different capabilities and power structures. Some are naturally strong enough to traverse the universe, while others are so weak they die after being exposed to a gust of wind. The process of enhancing oneself so that they become stronger and are able to interact with a higher level of existence is known as cultivation. The first few cultivation levels are mortal, body tempering, Kai training, and foundation realm. To learn more about cultivation levels, increase your authority. How can I increase my cultivation level? Lex asked. I am unable to answer this question. I only have specific knowledge of things related to Midnight Inn. Understanding cultivation levels is relevant to customers, which is why I have some basic knowledge. However, I have no information regarding how to alter someone's power level. I can only suggest the host complete quests and collect midnight points. Midnight points can be used to redeem various items and prizes. Pretty standard, Lex thought to himself. After mentally reviewing all the items he received as well as their uses one more time, he prepared himself to begin. He had to admit, despite his anxiety over his brain tumor, he felt a tinge of excitement that he hadn't felt in a long time. How do I withdraw an item? He asked. They can be withdrawn simply by thinking about it. All items given to you by the inn are stored at the inn and can be stored or withdrawn at will. With the thought, he withdrew his monocle and appreciated it closely. At a glance, there was nothing magical about it. A thin gold rim with a small loop on the side through which a petite gold chain was passed. After looking at it for a while, he put it on over his left eye. Database empty appeared in his vision, floating in the air, yet somehow the words did not obstruct his vision or distract him in the least. It was as if instead of having to read the words, the information was passed directly to his brain. Lex gave a slight nod before taking off the monocle and walking towards his PC. The monocle, as if already understanding his intention, swung out of his hands and landed neatly on top of it. The end of the chain transformed into a USB port which fit itself into the computer. A pop-up appeared on his screen which said updating database. It was all quite convenient. Lex only worried about what his internet bill might be after it was done updating. In theory, he had unlimited data, and that theory was probably going to be put to the test. With another thought, an A4-sized paper appeared in his hand which boldly had the word permit imprinted on it. After a moment, the piece of paper started to glow brightly, and when he finally recovered his sight, he found himself floating in the air. Around him was an endless sea of clouds, and directly beneath him a plot of land that would belong to his inn. With another thought, the Midnight Inn design interface appeared around him. As if in a video game, a panel appeared on the left side of his field of view with icons such as construction, landscaping, fauna, flora, furniture, decor, weather, and many more he could not see in detail because they were grayed out. The excitement in his heart that had been a small tinge now expanded and overwhelmed him. Now, how should he style his inn? What kinds of incredible scenes will he bring out for his guests from across the universe in his establishment? And most importantly, will there be pancakes? Chapter 4, British Lords or Arab Sheikhs? Lex's thoughts ran wild for a few minutes before he finally forced himself to calm down. Video games that let him run his imagination wild were always his favorite, which is why he had lost countless hours in games such as Minecraft. But too much freedom, too many options, had its own problem, which often led him to start various projects at once without finishing any. But he had learnt from his mistakes and knew it was better to move systematically rather than haphazardly. His first decision, before he put down a single block of stone, was how he would style his inn. Obviously, presentation was a big part of his inn, and he needed a clear direction to work in. So what shall it be? Should he style his inn like a lord's manor, with towers on his boundary walls, turrets and dormer windows with large stained glasswork visible on the building and regal sculptures dotting the gardens? Or should he go in a different direction and style it like the palace of an Arab sheikh, filled with towers with pointed domes and onion arches all around, gold inlaid geometric designs and calligraphy? Truth be told, despite his grand thoughts, he knew next to nothing about architecture or design, and anything spectacular he had ever made in video games was achieved through picking designs he liked from online and mixing and matching until he was satisfied. That was also his plan for this, but what should his theme be? After thinking for a while, he settled on making something like what he imagined a lord's manor would look like. Not that he knew specifically what that should look like. He'd seen a couple of pictures of Birmingham Palace online, maybe that's what he should aim towards. His decision was based on the fact that winter was on the horizon, and when he imagined comfort in cold weather, that's what he thought of. With his decision made, he got to work. At first he thought he would have to drag and drop items form the panels like he did in games, but discovered that designing using the interface was much more intuitive than that. With just his thoughts of how he wanted everything to look like, the inn started to take shape, and when his thoughts went outside the boundaries of what was allowed, or what would cost midnight points, he would instantly be made aware, and he altered his thoughts. The boundary wall was made of cobblestone, though each piece was uniform in size and height. The wall was 12 feet high and 8 feet across, with a walkway on top where supposedly guards would patrol or guests would come to admire the view. A large arch-shaped wooden gate was framed in the center of the front-facing wall, with a cobbled road cutting through a garden towards a small manor. Despite Lex's wishes, there were no statues in the gardens, as those cost midnight points, which he wanted to avoid using for the time being. The road, which was otherwise straight, ended at a roundabout right at the staircase, which was the entrance to the manor. The entrance led into a great hall which also served as the lobby. A long wooden bar was placed at the opposite end where the host would primarily greet a guest. Right beside the bar was a staircase which led from the ground floor to the first floor, where 3 guest rooms were found, each furnished with a king-sized bed, a small walk-in closet, 2 side tables, a dresser and some chairs, as well as an individual restroom. To the right of the lobby was a room that would serve as the lounge, where guests could relax or mingle, furnished with comfortable wooden furniture, most of it facing the fireplace where a fire was perpetually lit, though through some magic it would give off no ash or strong heat, instead it gave off only warmth. On the left of the lobby was the eatery, still maintaining the elegant wooden furnishings, but placed in a more casual setting. Beside the staircase was a door which exited towards the back of the manor, where the garden was landscaped with a few gentle hills, in contrast to the straight gardens in front, and was dotted with lawn chairs and a couple or large garden swings. Lex had wanted to add some flora and fauna, such as a few birds, squirrels and trees, but each cost midnight points, and though they seemed cheap right now, he didn't know what else he would need those points for, nor how easy or difficult they were to earn, so he controlled himself. Everything the inn had, in terms of structure and furniture, came free with the building permit. "What do you think, Mary?" he asked as he looked down at the inn. He felt a bit of pride when he thought about how all this was his now. The inn meets the basic requirements to function. It can comfortably meet the basic needs of guests up to Kai training, and is acceptable for guests at the Foundation realm. What if there's a guest above Foundation realm? The host does not have the necessary authority to ask questions pertaining to anything at or above Foundation realm, she answered cheerily. Lex nodded, he expected as much. Next he pulled out his 2 AI lease certificate and crushed it. The certificate started to glow and split in 2, slowly turning into 2 figures, an old but lean man and a young woman who looked slightly older than Lex. The old man had gray hair and a thick, gray mustache and was dressed in a suit. The woman had her hair tied in a bun and was similarly suited up. "Greetings, innkeeper, we are your AI assistants. Please advise us," they spoke in unison. "What are your names and what can you help me with?" he asked. "We can manage all tasks you assign us, from cooking, cleaning, entertainment, management, gardening, or anything else you can think of. Please note, if you require us to fight, you should know that our combat level is below that of the average human child. Should you require us to assail a chicken, we will do so without hesitation, and if luck is in our favor, may come back alive. For anything else we cannot say. Currently we do not have any names, please guide us," they replied in unison again. Lex's lips twitched. The Midnight Inn was really keen on not providing him with any help in keeping himself safe, wasn't it? What was he supposed to do if he encountered a violent guest with a high cultivation level? Well, at least he had the butter knife. "Very well, you will be Gerard, and you Velma," he spoke to the old man and young woman respectively. "Velma, you should stay in the lobby and receive guests. Gerard, you take care of any requests the guests have. I can't really think of much else, so I'll give you more jobs as they come along." Both the AIs nodded. "Is there anything else I need to do, Mary, or should I just use the golden tickets now?" "You can use the golden tickets. The first ticket selection is fixed to host's home world, however for the others you can select a world based on your authority. When choosing a world, the host should keep in mind his current capability when receiving guests. Please note, the host can only use 1 golden ticket a week." Lex nodded again, in instinct by now, and summoned a golden ticket. It was small, the size of his palm, and had Midnight Inn printed in bold black letters. It was a shame that he'd have to wait a week before he could start visiting other worlds, as the first one would link the inn to Earth, but Lex could bear with it. Filled with both traces of excitement and anxiety, he tore his first golden ticket in 2. The pieces started to shine and disappear like sand slipping through his fingers. Quest update. Quest complete. The host is rewarded with Midnight Inn level +1. Remarks: your journey has just begun. Don't slack off. New quest: receive your first guest. Lex raised an eyebrow at the notification and then asked Mary, what does the increase in Midnight Inn level mean? It represents the authority level you have. The higher the level of the inn, the more access you have to the various things the system can do for you. Lex nodded, it was as he assumed, and took a look at his updated status. Name: Lex Williams. Age: 23. Sex: male. Cultivation level: moral health: suboptimal. Developing brain tumor, damaged muscles, damaged joints, weakened digestive system, weakened lungs, weakened heart, mild nicotine addiction. Select to display full list. Midnight points: 500. Midnight Inn level 1. Inventory: bathroom slippers, self-defense butter knife, 2 golden tickets. Host attire quest: receive your first guest. Remark: your back has more hair than your chest. Please indulge in some self-care and don't humiliate the Midnight Inn. It was done, all he had to do now was wait. In the meantime, maybe he should look at all the things he could do with midnight points. And try not to focus on the remark. Chapter 5. Bestet. Somewhere on Earth, in a small village surrounded by mostly barren land, a black cat was sitting comfortable on the roof of a shed. The cold night air did not seem to bother it as it looked at the villagers, as if surveying its realm and its people. The villagers were gathered around a bonfire and were mingling with one another in a warm and joyous atmosphere. Life was tough, but it was pleasant. The cat yawned as if relaxing after a hard day's work and was ready to proceed with its nap when it suddenly noticed a golden glow beside it. When it turned to look, it saw a floating golden door in the air beside it, and from it the cat felt a warm, inviting aura. Curiosity filled the cat's eyes and it slowly got up. Lex was sitting comfortably in a lawn chair in the back garden, sipping on a cold lemonade as he looked through the midnight store. He had changed from his normal clothes into his host attire, which, for now, looked like a 3-piece suit. It was surprisingly comfortable and remarkably flattering on his figure, not to mention filled him with incredible power. Actually, Lex didn't know how incredible the power was, but using the suit he could teleport anywhere in the inn with a thought, and that was exhilarating. Other than that, the suit also brought him an incredible amount of awareness, and Lex was instantly filled with all the knowledge regarding the inn and everything in it. The first thing he learnt was that the inn required a monthly expense of 25 midnight points, and was a fixed expense that could not be evaded. It included a variety of miscellaneous items required for the inn's use that Lex had completely overlooked, such as cutlery, linens for rooms, towels, soaps and shampoos, scents, room service items, general maintenance, as well as groceries and various other things that gave Lex a headache. It was extremely fortunate that the inn covered for these things automatically, or Lex would have never even thought of them until it was too late, and he didn't want to imagine the consequences. He had Velma bring him a lemonade and a snack as he wanted to test her cooking abilities, and was extremely satisfied with the results. It was a moment of immense pleasure for him until he received the notification that 1 midnight point had been deducted as payment for the food. He was flabbergasted, but fortunately Mary informed him that this payment would cover his food for the rest of the month, as long as he only ate normal food as compared to spirit food. He was also informed the concept and division of spirit food was taken from his understanding of novels, meaning it was food that could aid someone with their cultivation. Since then he has been browsing the midnight market to see exactly what it could offer. Many tabs were grayed out, but the upgrades to the inn section was available and had options such as a gift shop which cost 325 midnight points, a recovery room for 500 points, a greenhouse for 425 points, and a meditation room for a whopping 1,200 points. Mary informed him that once he purchased one of these upgrades he would be able to buy more things to fill them up with, which could then be sold to guests. That led to another question that Lex had never considered: how would he collect payments from his guests? Another major thing he overlooked. This was a bit more complicated. The universe didn't have a unified currency which could be used, so the inn would analyze each guest and judged what form of currency they could pay, such as the mythical spirit stones, but as far as Lex was concerned the amount would always be in midnight points. For example, if a guest wanted to stay in one of his rooms for one night, Lex would ask him for 50 midnight points, but he would hear Lex asking him for whatever currency was relevant to him, be it dollars or spirit stones or something else. Furthermore, the payment for a guest's duration of stay had to be made in advance, while payments made for things the guest purchased, such as items or services, had to be made at the time of the transaction. Lex nodded to himself and was just about to start looking at what else he could get from the midnight market when he suddenly received a notification from the system: a guest has entered the inn. Please receive the guest. Lex jumped up from the lawn chair in alarm and quickly summoned both Velma and Gerard. Making sure they all looked presentable at a glance, he quickly teleported them all to the gate. With a welcoming smile on his face, Lex was ready to greet his first guest, but was frozen instantly by what he saw. A white bull was slowly making its way down the main road, with a litter strapped onto its back. A black cat was sitting in the litter, its pose filled with majesty as it surveyed the land around it. When the bull reached Lex finally, the cat looked at Lex up and down, as if inspecting goods, and finally spoke. "What is this place that has now availed the honor of my presence?" The cat's voice was feminine and sweet to listen to, but filled with power and a demand for respect. Lex snapped out of his stupor and looked at the cat. Beside its head he could see a few floating words. Name, Bastis power level. Too high for host to see. Species, Midnight in prestige level. Not yet available. The bull had its information displayed as well. Name, Phalak power level. Too high for host to see. Species, Midnight in prestige level. Not yet available. What in the world was this? Was this a creature from Earth? A talking cat with a cultivation too high for him to see? On top of that, even the bull that the cat was riding was too powerful for him to detect. He did not have a clear idea of what cultivation level would be too high for him to view, but he was sure it was akin to a monster way beyond the foundation level that his authority extended to. Whatever, a guest was a guest. He should not discriminate, as his future guests would be aliens. "Welcome guest to the Midnight Inn," Lex said in a calm, confident voice. "The Midnight Inn is a refuge for the weary traveler of the universe, a place where you may rest and enjoy before continuing on your journey. You may call me the innkeeper." The cat Bastis stared at Lex for a moment, as if contemplating what it had heard, before it continued asking, "Your inn brought me from Earth to a new space, innkeeper. Can it also send me to a different space that I wish to visit?" Lex froze again, unsure of how to answer, but the host attire that was completely in tune with the inn provided him with the answer. "Unfortunately, we do not provide such transportation services at the moment. Guests must return to the area they came from. This is to avoid letting powerful guests interfere with other worlds. I'm sure a guest as noble as yourself can understand." Lex's voice was still quite professional, but inwardly he was wondering how a guest could interfere with an entire world. "Pity, I forgot a necklace at Hazath last time I was there. I was hoping to go and retrieve it. Regardless, show me what amenities you offer. I am quite interested in this place. Father has grounded me on Earth for far too long." "Please, follow me," said Lex as he led the way to the inn. Internally his emotions were quite a mix of anxiety and excitement, and under normal circumstances he would not have been able to maintain such composure, but it seemed assisting him in that regard was a hidden feature of the suit. Bastet was quite intrigued by this new area that it had encountered. When she had seen the floating golden door it was just curiosity, but as soon as she neared it she was filled with pure spirit energy. She was so excited that she couldn't control her excitement momentarily and caused a massive earthquake. Fortunately she recovered quickly and saved her worshippers. Nonetheless she decided immediately that she had to follow the door. She had spent too long on the spirit-barren Earth, and this was her chance to escape. One must understand, it's not that Earth itself did not have spirit energy at all, but that the quality and concentration was too low, and lacked certain qualities that would leave it inconsequential to those of her cultivation. The spirit energy coming from the door was not too high in concentration, but its quality was much better than Earth, and more importantly did not lack those certain qualities that she needed. She hastily summoned her butler Phalak, who had assumed the appearance of a bull, gathered all her belongings and followed through the door. The door led to what appeared to be a mansion with vast open gardens and a clear blue sky. At first glance it looked a bit empty and quiet, no trees or flowers, no birds or insects, and no people or other life forms visible, but none of that mattered to Bastet because the air was dense with spirit energy. Though it was a far cry from the density in her father's palace, it was like heaven after coming from Earth. She had already started recovering some of her strength, and if she could stay here for a few decades she could fully recover. At that time she would be able to leave Earth on her own. As she reveled in her thoughts and Phalak slowly made his way down the road, 3 humans appeared in her path, surprising her. She did not feel any movement in the spirit energy around her, which meant they appeared using some other means, which intimidated her a bit. She looked over the 3 humans and discovered 2 of them to be completely normal, while the third, who was a young man, gave off an aura of unquestionable authority, yet at the same time a welcoming friendliness. After a short exchange the young man explained that this was an inn, much to Bastet's delight. She decided immediately that she must stay as long as possible. Chapter 6, The First Guess. Lex led the cat Bastet to the lobby and gave her a tour of his humble establishment. Initially he had been very pleased with the manor, but while showing her the eatery, the lounge and the back garden he was all too aware that Mary had said the inn was at most acceptable for those at the Foundation realm, and Bastet was clearly above that. He did not know exactly what requirements beings at higher power levels had and how he was expected to meet them, thus he did his best to make his place seem as accommodating as possible. He did not want to lose his first guest. To his relief, Bastet did not voice any complaints as he showed her around, though she didn't pay any compliments either. She viewed everything in silence, and how she felt about the place was known only to herself. When the small tour ended, Bastet asked softly, "What are the arrangements required to stay at your establishment?" Hearing those words immediately put a smile on Lex's face. He quickly looked over the information provided by the suit and informed Bastet, "You can rent a room for 50 midnight points a day, and can share the room with one guest if you wish. At the time of check-in you have to pay in advance for the number of days you are planning on staying. Breakfast is provided with the room every day between 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. Bastet paused for a moment before saying, "I'll take 2 rooms for a month. This should cover the expense." The cat turned its paw and a small, red ruby appeared in the air before her. Using his control over the inn, Lex accepted the ruby and it vanished into this air. As soon as the ruby vanished, Lex received a notification from the system, but he temporarily ignored and turned to Gerard, who had been quietly following them. "Gerard, please show these guests to their rooms and help them with anything they need." "Of course," Gerard replied in a smooth, suave voice and led the bull and cat up the stairs. It was somewhat of a peculiar sight, watching a bull with a cat atop its back effortlessly climbing up a staircase, yet Lex was hardly bothered by it now. It seemed as if he was watching them leave, but his attention was now diverted to the system's notifications. System notification: 3,000 midnight points accepted. 2 rooms booked for 30 days. 2 guests of Demi-Daylord realm accepted. Quest update: quest complete. The host's rewarded is being calculated. Reward upgraded for completing quests in less than 12 hours. Reward upgraded for hosting multiple guests at the same time. Reward upgraded for hosting guests many cultivation levels above host. Reward upgraded for hosting the strongest being on planet Earth. Reward rank SSS plus reward 1 unique opportunity token. Midnight Inn level +1. Remarks: truly the luck of a protagonist. Maybe you should try the lottery. New quest: as the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Lex couldn't stop himself from grinning. The cat and bull really brought him a lot of gifts, and also inadvertently gave him a lot of information. Firstly, their realms were Demi-Daylords, which just by the name sounded extremely intimidating. From what Bastet had said, he also learned that it had traveled to other worlds before, which meant interplanetary travel was possible for powerful beings, although he had no idea yet how that was possible. Furthermore, he learned that both Bastet and Falak were the most powerful beings on Earth, and if he could befriend them there was much he could gain. He seriously lacked information about the cultivation world and cultivation, and this was one potential path for him to learn more, if nothing else. Another important thing he learned was that rewards could be upgraded based on performance. Things like getting the most powerful being on the planet as a guest was something out of his control, for now at least, but finishing quests as quickly as possible was still something he could focus on. The last, and potentially most important 2 things he learnt were about how he can get benefits from the inn. So far anything given to him by the inn made sure not to give him too many advantages, whether in terms of defense or cultivation. He also quickly learned about the unique opportunity token. The inn rarely gave him any direct benefits, but it provided him with the opportunity to interact with various kinds of people, and exposed him to unique treasures and opportunities. It was up to him to figure out how he can take advantage of them. As for the token, as soon as it entered his inventory, the host attire suit informed him of its benefits, as well as the fact that he should use it as soon as possible. In this universe there were a few opportunities that could exist only once throughout the lifetime of the universe. Each one of these opportunities would take in billions of years to form, or would come to exist through a series of coincidences and could continue to exist for billions of years as well until someone harvested them. However, once they are harvested, they can never exist again. The token that Lex had obtained would automatically present him with one such opportunity. Theoretically, since they were so rare, the chances of someone getting even one within his entire lifetime would be infinitesimal, yet there was no need to take a chance. He summed the token, which looked like a small, gold coin with the letters "My Midnight Inn" engraved in it. Lex looked at it for only a moment before crushing it. A hologram appeared in front of him with 5 items listed, and their descriptions along with them. Mo's Blessing, a cultivation technique carried by a specific being in the universe as a part of his collection. Mo's Blessing boasts the strongest attack power of any cultivation art and can let whoever cultivates it challenge those, even above their cultivation level, in a head-on collision. It has stringent cultivation requirements, but at its highest level the cultivator can cut through the universe itself. Regal embrace, a cultivation technique carried by a specific being in the universe as a part of his collection. Regal embrace lets the cultivator build an impenetrable defense which can take head-on attacks even from those at a higher cultivation level. After certain accomplishments in this cultivation technique, the cultivator can stand there and embrace his enemy's attacks. At its highest level, it can allow its cultivator to survive even the destruction of a universe. Essence wormhole, a unique existence that can be absorbed by a living being. Once absorbed, it will absorb the consciousness of the being's past, present, and future, so that the being is aware of the existence of its entire lifetime and all the events that take place during it. However, a being that absorbs the essence wormhole will have all the events in its life become a fixed constant that cannot be changed. Bangle of Narn, a single galaxy condensed into a bangle that can be worn without any harmful consequences. Everything that exists within that galaxy can be used and controlled by the wearer. The aura of the bangle cannot be suppressed and can be easily identified by all Landlord realm cultivators within 99 million light-years. Breath of Elizabeth, an item in Elizabeth's possession. Its use and function cannot be identified by the system. It is suspected that anyone who takes the breath of Elizabeth will attract Elizabeth's ire. Lex's body trembled as he read the description for these items. He directly disqualified the essence wormhole and the breath of Elizabeth. He had no interest in becoming enemies with some mysterious person, nor did he want to live a life where he would be like an actor in a movie, playing out a role knowing the beginning and end without being able to actually change anything. Surely there was more to the essence wormhole, but he did not want to take any chances. The other three items, however, greatly attracted his attention. When he envisioned Mo's blessing, he could help but let his mind wander and think of himself like every superhero or movie protagonist he knew, fighting through a horde of enemies to get what he wanted. He even imagined himself saying the cliché line of destroying the heaven and earth if they stand in his way. Yet despite that, he also couldn't stop himself from being attracted to Regal Embrace, as though that would not let him fight through a horde of enemies. It would be what kept him safest. Managing the Midnight Inn sounded like it could attract some real trouble, and being indestructible would really help with that. However, what attracted him most was the Bangle of Narn. Lex never imagined himself as someone who was greedy, but owning an entire galaxy, and everything in it carried an irresistible temptation that wholly overwhelmed him. It was a kind of temptation that he had never understood before, and honestly, if it weren't for the fact that the bangle gave off an aura that could be sensed, he would have chosen it without hesitation. He had no idea what a Landlord realm was nor how powerful that would make someone, but if that person could detect something 99 million light-years away, they would absolutely not be weak. There was a part of him that told him it'd be safe so long as he took it and kept it in the inn, since the inn could only be accessed through the doors he created with the golden tickets, but he had no way to be sure. The host attire would not tell him if anyone could access the inn directly from wherever it was built, nor how safe it was, nor if it could suppress the bangle's aura. The temptation was great to the point of almost overwhelming him, but it was just too dangerous. Lex was struggling, completely unsure of what to pick as his hand hovered over the bangle. But then something happened and Lex was shocked. Chapter 7. Regal Embrace. Mo's blessing disappeared from the list. In the few moments during which Lex read the list and was deciding, someone actually took Mo's blessing. Was it the being who had it in his collection, or did someone else use it? It didn't matter. Lex suddenly panicked. With one less option, he knew which one he had to choose, and after giving the bangle one last look filled with temptation and longing, he quickly selected Regal Embrace. Living was the most important, and maybe he could get another chance to get the bangle from the system, but for that he'd have to be alive first. Little did he know, only a few moments after he selected Regal Embrace, the Bangle of Narn also disappeared from that list. A stream of information entered Lex's mind, and instantly Lex felt the difference. Just the knowledge itself elevated his mind and filled his body with a comfortable feeling. It didn't take long, only a few minutes, and when Lex opened his eyes he was filled with vigor. He had gotten a cultivation method, and it truly was an amazing one, not that he had any point of reference. Currently he only had the relevant knowledge on how to start, and the rest of the information would reveal itself to him as he slowly elevated his cultivation. But starting cultivation itself was a huge ordeal Lex must overcome. Regal Embrace was different from other cultivation techniques, and in the information provided it stated clearly how it was different. A normal cultivation technique for humans would begin by tempering the mortal body with spirit energy, a special kind of energy present throughout the universe, and improve its strength and endurance, and this was called the body tempering realm. Once the body was tempered sufficiently, it would be ready to accept spirit energy inside of it, and that is when the cultivation could truly be considered to have begun. Once inside, the spirit energy would improve body function in every way and make the cultivator faster and stronger, as well as improve the cultivator's mental faculties. Each realm would then focus on developing a specific aspect of a cultivator or put them in touch with new, more powerful energies. Regal Embrace, however, was different right from the get-go. The body tempering realm was very different whilst cultivating Regal Embrace versus something else, as it did not have 9 stages. Instead, the body would need to undergo 4 special procedures that would affect the body, the spirit, and the soul. Every living being had a soul, and their life and death and even cultivation depended on it. Each time a cultivator progresses his or her cultivation realm, the soul would be upgraded as well, even if not directly. Having said that, just because a being has a soul does not mean they have a body and a spirit either. A soul is simply what gives life, but the spirit is what allows the living being to think and make conscious decisions. A being with a soul, but no spirit would only simply exist, and any interaction it has with the surrounding universe would just be a result of the characteristics of its soul and nothing else. A spirit is what would guide the soul to take action. Different beings exhibited that differently. For example, both an animal and a plant have spirits. Animals use them to hunt, eat, rest, etc., whereas plants use it to grow towards sunlight, search for water with their roots, and so on. There are also beings in the universe with just a soul and spirit and are incorporeal beings. Last was the body. The body hosts the soul and allows it to interact with the material world, as well as protect beings with weak souls from randomly disintegrating. For example, a regular human soul can only exist for a few moments outside the protection of a body, and would collapse under the pressure of its own existence. Therefore, the Regal Embrace had only 4 stages in body tempering. The difference does not end there. As for these 4 realms, Lex did not actually need to go through any cultivation. The system would perform the 4 procedures for him, at a cost, of course. The first 3 procedures would alter his body, spirit, and soul respectively, and the 4th would fuse all 3 together to form a single unified existence. Since the focus of Regal Embrace was building the ultimate defense, it focused on all aspects of the cultivator, and once they all joined together, they would become stronger than any of them individually. Of course, this had both pros and cons. The biggest con was that any injury to his physical body would also injure his spirit and soul, and likewise an injury to the spirit or soul would also affect the other 2. As a result, healing would also take longer and would be harder. The pro, however, is that he would be much harder to injure in the first place. An attack that could normally kill him would only injure him instead, and Lex would much rather be hurt than dead. Furthermore, he would automatically be immune to many hazards or dangers. For example, being in the presence of a higher-leveled cultivator can sometimes put a lot of pressure on someone's soul if the difference in realms is too great, whereas for Lex, pressure on the soul would not really be an issue. Another thing is that traditionally it is very difficult for a cultivator to improve the spirit or soul. However, for Lex, they would always grow along with his cultivation. He would have a huge advantage over normal cultivators who normally only focus on one aspect. There were a few other pros and cons, but they were minor and Lex couldn't be bothered with them right now. His only focus was on starting his cultivation. To start the first procedure, he would have to pay 1,500 midnight points, after which the system would begin the first procedure to alter his physical body. What excited him the most was that this would fix tumor problem when he finished all 4 steps. It hadn't even been a full day and he'd already found the solution. Without any further hesitation, he paid the 1,500 midnight points and began his first step into the cultivation world. His body disappeared from the inn and appeared in a white room where he lay naked on a table. Before he had time to process what was happening, a syringe injected something in his arm, and instantly he felt his mind relax. His thoughts faded, and he felt himself floating as if in a void, unaware of what was happening to his body, which for him was very fortunate. Various tubes had begun attaching themselves all over his body, ejecting various serums into his blood. His muscles squirmed and his bones cracked and healed constantly. Filth and damaged tissue pushed themselves out of his pores and his body was slowly built back up. Instead of becoming skinny from all the exertion his body was undergoing, his body began to swell from the newly developing muscle. The process continued for 8 hours, completely transforming Lex's body internally with minimal external changes. When the tubes fell off his body, he looked slightly more muscular and his posture and bone structure had improved to the optimal state. While he could not have been called fat or even chubby before, his cheeks had gone in and he had developed a sharp jawline. His skin was a lot clearer and he had lost the few stretch marks he'd developed growing up. Gradually Lex's mind cleared and he woke up, still on the table in the white room. All the filth and tubes had been cleared, so he saw none of it, but from the moment he woke up he knew he was different. If just his body's strength was measured, or rather his defense, it would be around the 3rd stage of body tempering, but that's not what Lex was feeling because he didn't know what 3rd stage body tempering should be like. Instead, he was amazed by how incredible he was feeling. He had aches and pain all over his body, but they were so light he never noticed them unless he focused on them, but now they were gone. Breathing had become so much easier as well as enjoyable than before. It came to the point where he just now realized that although he was not in pain before, his body was struggling just a bit every time he breathed. He had been free from the burden his body had gradually placed on him without him ever even noticing. Even while just laying down, he felt as if he was indulging in the greatest pleasure. Even without doing anything, he felt alive. Slowly, ever so slowly, as if his reality was a dream he might stir awake from if he rushed, Lex got off the table and looked down at himself. Although the changes to his appearance weren't drastic, they absolutely weren't negligible. He flexed his muscles and felt the strength in his new body. He felt lighter and stronger than he had ever before. He pulled up his status to view his changes. Name: Lex Williams. Age: 23. Sex: male. Cultivation level: regal embrace. Body tempering. Stage 1 health: suboptimal. Developing brain tumor. Midnight points: 1974. Midnight in level 2. Inventory: bathroom slippers, self-defense butter knife, 2 golden tickets, host attire. Quest: new quest. As the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Remark: keep working hard. If you raise your cultivation high enough, one day you'll be able to cast illusions to make yourself look better. Once again ignoring the remarks, Lex spent a few minutes going over his status and what it meant. Firstly, and most importantly, although his brain tumor wasn't gone, all his other physical ailments had been cured. Second, he had just a little under 2,000 midnight points left. It seemed like a lot, but when you considered that 2 of his rooms were booked for the next month, severely affecting his ability to earn points during that time, it did not seem like it was enough, especially when the next upgrade in Regal Embrace cost 5,000 points. He also had to use the points wisely to improve the inn in the best and quickest way that he could think of. Mary, where am I? Lex asked finally once he was done organizing his thoughts. You're in a special area made for you to undergo the starting process of your cultivation journey. The payment to use it was taken when you paid to start the procedure. You can leave anytime you want, similar to how you use the host attire to teleport. However, I suggest you acclimatize yourself to your new body and strength. Try walking, running, jumping and a few other basic exercises. Lex first equipped the host attire, quickly remembering he was nude in front of Mary. Then he tried walking and realized his balance was slightly off. His body weight had changed as well as his strength, but his brain was still not used to it. A few laps around the room and he was back to normal. Running again caused him a bit of an issue because he did not expect the length of his strides to be so great. However, he quickly got used to that as well. He did push-ups, sit-ups, crunches and anything else he could think of, and realized that his fitness had improved drastically. He basically did not need to stop at all while doing those exercises, whereas before, he could have managed a maximum of 20 if his life depended on it. Lex finally stopped with a grin on his face, clearly very impressed with his improvement. But he did not leave the White Room yet. He still had more things he wanted to figure out. My Midnight Inn level has reached 2. What does that mean I can do? A host of new features have become available for you. Similar to the pro bono wing of the inn that you learned about from your quest, the inn has specialized areas that only cater to special guests, some of which you can now set up. Furthermore, you now have the ability to buy more land for the inn as well as expand the initial inn building as well. Currently you have 300 acres of land, but you can expand that as you wish and set up different areas with different climates, terrain, features or whatever else you can think of. Furthermore, a feature now available to you is building your own residence as well as the residence for one staff member that you can recruit. The residences will have special security features that prevent anyone from entering unless invited by you or recruits. Currently, these are the only new features available to you. Lex nodded at Mary subconsciously, his thoughts already on his upcoming task. He liked to plan things out before he did them, and now it was time for him to plan. He needed to take another look at the Midnight Store, understand all it offered, and draw up a plan of action. Chapter 8, Plan. It was 6 in the morning, daylight was slowly creeping up, painting the horizon in a golden hue. A cool breeze was blowing and the soft tweeting of a few birds could be heard in the distance. Lex sat in a garden chair, a cup of hot chocolate in his hand and before him on a table lay a notebook full of scribbles and random notes. Yesterday when Lex returned to the inn it was already night. Bastet and Falak had not left either of their rooms nor requested anything either, so there was not much to do. Lex was not tired in the least so immediately began planning what to do. After about 20 minutes of brainstorming he came to the conclusion that the inn was eerily quiet and still, and he couldn't think in such an environment. He opened up the Midnight Store, and immediately bought a couple dozen birds, squirrels, and rabbits for a total of 30 MP midnight points. It wasn't much considering how much space he had, but he wanted to be frugal with spending his midnight points, and this was enough for now. In fact, he wouldn't have wasted these points at all and would have preferred to bring small animals from Earth directly, but apparently he did not have the authority to do that yet. He then opened the design interface and spent 1 MP to start a gentle, constant breeze for the next 24 hours. Using another 50 MP, he bought a few flowering trees and sparsely placed across the back garden. It pained him to spend his points this way, but environment mattered, and if it was bothering him, he couldn't even imagine how his guests would feel, and he absolutely could not afford to annoy his guests. With that distraction out of the way, he spent the night looking over the midnight store, understanding each and every item it sold and asking Mary questions about them in detail. When he finally asked everything he was curious about or get answers to, he set his mind to planning out exactly how to proceed. There were 3 important tasks ahead of him that he needed to accomplish as soon as possible, at least as he saw it. Firstly, he needed to complete the quest as soon as possible and try to get the best result he could manage. Secondly, he needed to buy and set up the gift shop. The gift shop itself would not provide him with anything, but having the gift shop could allow him to buy things from the midnight store to place in the shop that he could then sell for a profit. It wouldn't immediately get him any profits, but that was at least one new possible avenue of income. More importantly, if he found something useful to himself instead of putting it in the gift shop, he could just keep it for himself, since he was technically the owner of the item. Similarly, if he owned something, he could put it in the shop to sell. That feature wouldn't be important for now, but when he had multiple worlds connected, selling interesting things from Earth could be an easy way to earn some midnight points. The third thing he needed to do was quit his job. Even after he'd sold his video game, he continued his regular job without telling anyone of his success. It brought some semblance of routine to his life, and it wasn't as if he had much else he would be rather doing, so he just went along with it. Furthermore, he'd built some friendship with a few of his coworkers, and although they weren't too close, Lex didn't feel like just leaving them behind. He'd also jotted down a few more ideas here and there, especially when he looked at his own residence as well as the concept of recruiting someone to work for the inn. But those were thoughts for later. He should not take on more than he could handle at one time. He pulled up the midnight store and viewed the pro bono wing. It cost a sweeping 2,500 MP and was out of his reach currently. Ignoring it, he turned the page to the gift shop and instantly chose to buy it. With that, he only had 1,541 MP left, but he ignored the pinching feeling in his heart and focused on the inn. The manor expanded slightly and a small new room opened up with its entrance in the lobby. There was a small, wooden counter at the far end with a glass case and a few empty shelves. For now, the space in the gift shop was limited and only a few items could be placed in there, but once he expanded it, he could add more stuff to it. Currently, he only had 2 guests and both of them were from Earth, so it was unlikely that he'd be able to sell them anything from Earth. His only choice was to fill it with items from the midnight store. He navigated to the gift shop category of the store and took a look. The list of things he could buy currently was small, limited by his authority. There were only 4 items. Whistle of Bathylona 120 MP, a whistle that summons a wisp named Bathylona. Wisps are common pets for children in the Jotun system, and Bathylona is no different. Saturn cake 100 MP, a mildly sweet cake, a common delicacy in the Jotun system. It causes feeling of euphoria in whoever eats it. If the consumer is below Kai gathering realm, it will be lost in the feeling of euphoria for a few hours, completely unaware of what's happening to or around them. Icarus wings 150 MP, artificial wings that can be attached to anyone or thing, giving the ability for flight for 6 hours. The wings cannot sustain damage equivalent to Kai gathering realm. Botlam dew 80 MP, dew collected from plants on Botlam Hill. The dew has strong healing properties and can be used on various lifeforms below the foundation realm. Botlam dew is extremely poisonous to lesser demons. All 4 items looked interesting to Lex, and he could think of a few cases where some of them might be useful to himself, but currently none of them helped him much. He needed to consider if he should buy all of them and put them in the store or only 1 or 2 for now. Spending 450 MP currently didn't seem worth it for now, but he wasn't sure what would or wouldn't attract his guests' attention. After all, does a cat need a pet? Or would a cow be interested in flying? Neither of them had ordered any food, and it was yet to be seen if they exited for breakfast, so would they be interested in a cake? He could instead use those points to buy a greenhouse, recovery room, or meditation room. He was struck with confusion again as he didn't know what would attract his guests' attention. Being a business owner was stressful. He wasn't sure what would be best for his inn at the moment. Lex closed his eyes and took a slow, deep breath. Having too many options confused him. He needed to focus and not get distracted by random thoughts. That's why he'd made a plan. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with determination once again, and all his thoughts, double guessing or doubting himself, had disappeared. He bought one of each item and decisively placed them all in the store, spending a total of 450 MP, leaving with only 1091 MP. He summoned Velma and told her she'd be in charge of gift shop should any of his guests come in. He priced all the items at 200 MP each. Mary, I'm heading back to my apartment. Can you let me know if Bastet or Falak leave their rooms? I want to take the opportunity to talk to them a bit. Sure, no problem, said the tiny, floating woman who appeared right in front of him. Anything else? Yes, how exactly should I try to find guests back on Earth? Can I just invite them? How would they enter? Currently there are 3 ways for guests to come to the inn. The first one is through random doors that will open throughout Earth as long as there are vacancies at the inn. There is, however, no fixed schedule for those doors opening, and it's impossible to predict where they will open. They could open at the bottom of the ocean or in someone's closet. There's just no way of predicting. The second way is through golden keys that you can buy from the midnight store. You can give them to people or leave them for people to find. It's a one-time use item that can bring one person to the inn. However, it is my recommendation that you do not directly give anyone the keys for your own safety. Currently you are very weak, even with your new upgraded cultivation, and anyone with even the slightest malice could seriously harm you. Even if they do not suspect you are the owner of the inn, someone could harm you just to learn about how you got access to those keys. Furthermore, the Midnight Inn system was initiation by a spirit treasure that has merged with your soul. Currently, it is inseparable, but if anyone kills you, the treasure will reveal itself and will be available for anyone to take. This should not be a problem for you on Earth where, based on your memories, people have limited knowledge of the soul and spirit treasures, but in other worlds this is a threat that you should be aware of. Mary's words gripped Lex's heart with fear. It never even occurred to him that people might want to hurt him if they found out about the system. Not that he had any intention of letting anyone find out, but he needed to be careful. Not noticing Lex's change of expression, Mary continued, the third way of entering the inn is to have been a guest once. Anyone who avails any of the inn services receives a complimentary golden key with which they can return anytime they want. That golden key is also a one-time use item. In the future, as the level of the inn increases, there will be more ways for guests to enter the inn. Please note, currently there is no way to filter who can or cannot enter the inn. This means anyone with a golden key will be able to enter, even if you do not wish them to, such as in the case of a bad guest or those who have malicious intent. To unlock such a feature, you will have to raise the level of the inn. Lex groaned. It felt like raising the level of the inn would be a common theme in his near future, but there was little he could do about that for now without finding a way to increase his income. Either way, it was now time for him to go. He had a job to quit. Chapter 9, Resignation. With a thought, Lex returned from the inn back to his apartment. He could return from the inn back to wherever he entered with a thought. Returning back to the inn, however, took a few minutes, during which if the process was interrupted it would be cancelled. Lex wasn't sure why there was a difference in coming back from the inn to going there, but it would go away when he raised the inn level. Or so he assumed. The first thing he did when he was back was check on the fancy monocle. He was really concerned about how much data it would use up to fill its database. If it just learnt everything from Wikipedia or some online library, that would still be bearable, but if it decided to download the entire internet to fill its database, there was no way that wouldn't invite trouble. That's assuming that downloading is how the monocle fills its database. Who knew how these treasures from the system worked? Fortunately, when he found the monocle, the tab on the computer said database filled, and there didn't seem to be any problem, so hopefully all was well. Lex put on the monocle over his right eye and took a look around the room, and was instantly amazed. Random bits of data showed up around anything he focused on, and the data would disappear or expand based on his thoughts. He looked at a table and he was shown data about the kind of material, its dimensions, its durability, the amount of wear it had accumulated, and so much more. He looked at himself in the mirror and he started seeing data on himself, his height at 6 feet 1 inch, his weight of 185 pounds, the length of his hair, the material his clothes were made from, and much more. It was impressive. However, Lex disabled all the bits of information and kept it so that it would only show details he was interested in. With a thought, he returned the monocle to the system and went towards the shower. It had been over a day since he last showered, and he felt a strong urge to wash. After a long, hot shower and an equally long time in front of the mirror admiring his new body, Lex put on some pants, a t-shirt and sneakers and left his apartment. He could have sent in his resignation via email, but it didn't feel right. He wasn't close to his boss, but still had an amicable, professional relationship with her, so it would be better. He also wanted to say farewell to a couple of his coworkers. He plugged in his earphones, a New York Standard, put his playlist on shuffle and was on his way towards the subway. Lex, lost in his thoughts, didn't notice, but his stride was greater and his pace faster. He exuded a sense of purpose and confidence that he lacked before, and his now sturdy figure attracted just as much attention as the soft smirk on his face. Once he got on his train, he opened the midnight store and bought a golden key to invite a guest. A key was for 100 MP and its price would double after each purchase, and the price would reset once every week. For Lex, this presented a problem, as buying keys was a bit of a gamble, as a guest would need to stay for at least 2 nights if he wanted to break even, or possibly buy something from the gift shop. From Mary he learned that 1 MP was approximately $1,000 if a guest was to use money. According to her, paying using some kind of spiritual item rather than cash would be more feasible for his guests from Earth. How was he supposed to know where to look for guests who had spiritual items? He had absolutely no idea, but his luck had been great the last couple of days, so he was planning on continuing to rely on it for this. When he reached his stop, a golden key fell out of his pocket onto his seat, but before anyone could notice he was already gone. For a while nobody paid the key any attention, but eventually a young child was attracted to its shine and picked it up. He tried to show his mother, but she was preoccupied with something on her phone. He decided to show her later. Unaware that his key had fallen into the hands of a child, Lex continued on his journey till he eventually reached a high-rise building. He looked up to admire the building one last time, and reminisced about the years he'd spent here. His company was on the 9th floor in this building with over 80 employees, many of whom Lex was familiar with. He worked as a web developer and the work was interesting enough at first, but he'd become bored with it in his recent life like he'd become bored with everything else. At least he knew the reason for that boredom now, and even without resolving it yet, his current path in life left little room for anything but excitement. Taking a slow, deep breath one last time, inhaling the smells of the warm pretzels and bagels being sold from the food carts nearby, Lex shook himself free of his hesitation and moved towards his office with purpose. It was still early, so people were still coming in. Harry and Elaine, his 2 co-workers who he was closest to, hadn't come in yet, but his boss, Jessica, was already sitting in her office. He knocked on her door and waited for Jessica to come in before he proceeded in. "Hey Jessica, I'm glad I caught you early. I need to talk to you about something." "Lex?" Jessica looked up from her computer and saw him come in the door. "I hope everything is well. When you didn't come in yesterday, I had someone try and contact you, but they weren't able to reach you." Yes, everything is fine. I'm sorry I wasn't able to come in yesterday, but the reason why I wasn't able to come is what I'm here to talk to you about." Lex sat down on a chair opposite to Jessica and considered what to say for a moment before he spoke. "I'm here today to turn in my resignation." "What?" Jessica exclaimed, taken by surprise. "How come? The company has always treated all of its employees well, and I've never heard any complaints from you before." Lex let out a weak smile and replied, "You're right. The company has always treated me fairly, and I've never had any complaints, nor had I any intentions of leaving before. However, I was recently offered a very promising position as team lead at a new startup. They needed a reply from me as soon as possible, which is why I couldn't come in yesterday as I was visiting their site." "Ah, well, congratulations," Jessica replied, quickly regaining her composure. She only knew Lex about as well as the other employees under her, which was enough to know that he was a competent worker and gave her very few problems. "Will you be leaving immediately? I must remind you that if you forego your 2 weeks' notice, you forfeit your gratuity and any other benefits the company would normally afford you." Lex smiled internally. Just the investments he'd made from his $7 million gave him a regular return higher than his salary, so money was the least of his concerns. "Thank you for reminding me, but I must start immediately. I will just have to forfeit them." "Well, in that case, I wish you good luck on your new endeavors. To make it official, please submit a written application to Henry from HR, who will then have you fill out some paperwork and collect any company property you have, as well as have an exit interview. Once the process is complete, bring the papers back to me and I'll sign them." Jessica was as formal as always, but in a way that made things easier. Lex exited her office, but Harry and Elaine were still not in, so he went towards HR. The process took much longer than he expected, and a little over 3 hours later Lex returned to Jessica. She looked over the papers and eventually signed off on them. "Well, it seems you're moving on to bigger things, Lex," she said as she stood up from her chair. "I wish you success and great fortune in your future endeavors." She reached out for a goodbye handshake and Lex complied, thinking it a good way to say farewell. What he did not expect was that as soon as they held hands, Jessica's eyes widened in shock and she blurted out, "A cultivator." Chapter 10, Cultivators on Earth. Cultivators on Earth. Lex was taken aback, and the surprise showed clearly on his face without the host attire to help him control his expressions. For a moment they both just stared at each other before they both quickly regained their composure. How can you tell? Lex asked, not bothering to try and hide the fact that he was cultivating. He needed to learn more about cultivators on Earth and how he could come in contact with them. An opportunity such as this would be impossible to find again. How can I not tell? You're not even trying to hide your internal strength. Hasn't anyone told you that you need to be careful? If I was a regular person, you could have seriously hurt my hand. Lex immediately realized that he was probably using more force in his handshake than a normal person. This meant he still didn't have a good grasp of his strength yet, as he hadn't even noticed. I'm sorry, I just broke through yesterday. I guess I'm not used to my strength yet. Wait, does this mean you're a cultivator as well? Jessica didn't reply but stared at him intently. Silence filled the room and slowly tension started to build until it began weighing on Lex. Who is your mentor? She finally asked, her tone suddenly accusatory. What district do you belong to? Why haven't you disclosed yourself in the Bluebird office? Jessica's grip on his hand strengthened and Lex suddenly became aware that he couldn't pull it out. He was panicking a little now, but the situation wasn't out of control yet. He could still redeem himself. I don't have a mentor. I don't know what you mean by district. You're the first cultivator I'm meeting. How could you cultivate if you don't have a mentor? Don't lie to me, my cultivation is a lot higher than you and I'd have no problem at all taking care of you. Explain yourself here clearly or I'll take you to the Bluebird office. You should know how they treat undocumented cultivators in their territory. No, please, listen to me, Lex pleaded. He could feel the pressure she was applying on his hand, and he was sure she'd crush his bones if she used even a little more strength. Even if Regal Embrace was focused on defense, it could do little for him if the gap in strength between him and his opponent was huge. He needed to quickly come up with an explanation that didn't expose the system. He was too young to die. He'd never have expected to encounter danger on Earth. He thought it was the other worlds that would endanger him. Fortunately, when he learnt Regal Embrace, it also gave him general information about other cultivation techniques so that he would understand how Regal Embrace was different. He could use that information to explain how he taught himself. I found my cultivation technique on a piece of paper in a bottle on the beach. It explained a lot about cultivation, but I just thought it was some kind of yoga. It wasn't until I tried it out and felt the changes in my body that I started taking it seriously. I just broke through yesterday for the first time. I don't know anything else about cultivation other than what I learnt from that bottle, and I've never met another cultivator before. Lex tried to sound as desperate and as honest as possible, which he was in the beginning, as Jessica was very intimidating. It wasn't until he remembered that he could retreat to the inn as long as he was given a little bit of time that he recovered internally. Jessica stared at him a while longer, trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Ultimately she let go of his hand, but just as Lex was beginning to feel relief, he felt a strange aura surround him. It was the first time he felt something like that. If he had to choose a word to describe it, it would be sharp. He felt as if any movement he made could hurt him, and that he was in more danger than before. The aura, however, disappeared just as quickly as it came. I will believe you for now, but you have to follow me to the Bluebird office. All legal cultivators must be registered and have an identity token on them at all times. If you try anything funny or try to run away, well, I'm sure you felt my kai surround you just now. As the sub-district head, I have the authority to eliminate any suspected threats. Lex suddenly got goosebumps. This was bordering on insane. He was just trying to quit his job, and his life was threatened time and time again by his ex-boss. The cultivation world really was dangerous. Fine, I'll follow you. We've worked together for so many years, you know me. I won't do anything funny. At Lex's words, Jessica was suddenly reminded that she had indeed worked with Lex for a few years now, and although she did not have an intimate knowledge of the man, she'd spent enough time with him to get an idea of the kind of person he was. She relaxed visibly but didn't drop her guard completely. Follow me and act natural. If anyone in the office asks where we are going, just say I'm taking you downtown to the legal office to finalize your resignation. Lex smiled weakly and nodded. He followed her out of her office and they cut through the building quickly. He noticed Henry was sitting at his workstation, but this didn't really seem like the time to catch up. Fortunately, no one questioned where they were going. When they reached the street, a black SUV was parked at the door with a chauffeur waiting for them holding the door open. Lex climbed into the car behind Jessica and they were off. For a time they sat in silence. Lex, who had once again regained his composure after constantly being threatened, was thinking about how he could remedy the situation. A lot of it depended on how they treated him at this so-called Bluebird office. But waiting to see how things turned out wasn't something Lex could do. He had to take initiative. So are cultivators very common? Lex asked, sounding reluctant. Jessica hesitated but answered eventually. Cultivators are rare enough so that the general populace does not know about them, but are common enough that there are special laws pertaining to them. Most powerful or old families have them, and most of the upper echelon of any large companies have them. In democratic governments they are rarer, but every military is full of them. You can consider it as if any person of a certain status has at least some interaction with cultivators, if they are not so themselves. Even a normal person who raises himself to success will end up encountering them eventually, and may even become one. So how come there's such a big secret? I never even believed they were real until I got my cultivation technique. It's a secret, but not a closely guarded one. There's tons of books and movies and shows about them everywhere. But most news outlets strictly control what's reported as actual news, and cultivators themselves have a huge incentive to keep things quiet. Cultivation resources are rare, and the more demand there is for it, the greater the competition will be. If it's not such a big deal, then why did you react so strongly to finding out I'm a cultivator? There is a stark difference between a registered and unregistered cultivator. Because of their increased strength and abilities, if cultivators are not regulated, there would be chaos everywhere. In older days, clans or sects used to maintain the peace. In the modern day, things have changed. In the US, 3 private companies have the government contract to regulate cultivator activity. Bluebird is one of them. They maintain a list of registered cultivators and some basic information about them. This way, if an incident occurs, they can more easily track whoever was responsible. Unregistered cultivators, though, are a different story. Registering has no real drawbacks, and instead has many benefits, which is why only those people who have something to hide don't register. Most of the time, they're criminals who have run away from another country, or people with malicious intent. Jessica hesitated a bit once again, unsure of how much more would be appropriate to reveal. Eventually she decided to give Lex a warning. You should be very careful. If you really did cultivate yourself, and have no background to rely on, then you fall under the most vulnerable category of cultivators. Although cultivators have to follow special laws and their activities are regulated, they are also afforded special privileges. It's not so bad normally, but if a cultivator with a high level of cultivation ever perceives you as a threat to his or her interest, they won't hesitate to kill you, and at most they'll just get a fine. If you want to survive, I strongly suggest you join an organization as soon as possible. Chapter 11. Bluebird Office. Lex frowned as he mulled over what Jessica told him. It seemed like he really had underestimated the dangers that came along with cultivation. He thought, similar to the many novels he'd read, once he started cultivating he'd have a huge advantage over everyone and people would admire him wherever he went. Now it seemed like he needed to be more careful. As for joining an organization, it all depended on what the requirements were. Lex was about to continue asking more questions, but the car came to an abrupt stop. Jessica exited and signaled Lex to follow. Much to his surprise, they were at the Empire State Building. As soon as they entered, a team of security guards surrounded Lex and escorted him to a private section of the building where they entered an elevator. The thing that caught him off guard was that the list of floors started from first and then went directly to the basement, with there being 44 levels of basements. Jessica pressed B10 and the elevator swiftly began its descent, and stopped just as abruptly. When they came out, Lex was once again surprised. Clearly Jessica hit the button for B10 and he clearly felt the elevator go down, yet the floor they came out on had windows to a breathtakingly beautiful view of a sea of clouds that surrounded the building, crashing against mountains in the distance. No sign of the city they were just in was visible, and it was as if they had been teleported to another place completely. Follow them to the waiting room while I report your situation, said Jessica. Someone will come and interview you and, if all goes well, complete your registration. Since you're new to the cultivation world, I'll have someone send you all the brochures and pamphlets for all the organizations that accept itinerant or lone cultivators. Before Lex could thank Jessica for her consideration or ask any questions, he was led politely to the waiting room and left there alone. It was a small room with a couple of chairs at opposite ends of a small table and a window to the outside with a view. You should be careful in what you say, Mary warned him, speaking for the first time since this ordeal started. If you lie in front of a cultivator with a higher cultivation, they can usually tell that you're lying. That's why I didn't even risk speaking to you earlier. Without the host attire to control your expressions, Jessica would have immediately noticed you getting distracted while you were talking to me in your head. It would raise her suspicions. I'll be careful, he said, suddenly remembering Mary. He was not yet completely used to the system, and all the benefits it offered. Do you have any advice on what to do? Sorry, all the information I have on Earth is based on your memories, and you currently have not unlocked any features of the Midnight Inn that can help you in this predicament. All I can say is that you are lucky that in terms of physical strength, your body is equivalent to a normal body tempering stage 1 cultivator. You can use that as an advantage to support your story that you only just broke through. You haven't done anything suspicious, so if they investigate you a little they should discover that they have nothing to worry about. Lex sat down on the chair and began thinking about what to say to his interrogators. If he really was investigated it would easily be discovered that he had received no actual job offer, but he could use his current net worth and his newly developed interest in cultivation to explain why he quit. He needed more time to cultivate. If they asked to see his cultivation technique he would be in trouble. Although he knew the difference between Regal Embrace and others, he did not know an actual cultivation technique he could give someone. If they asked, he would have to insist on not telling. Saying he got his cultivation technique from a bottle on the beach was a flimsy excuse he made up in the moment, and was difficult to believe though he supposed it was not impossible. If they asked to see it he would say he destroyed it so as to keep it a secret. Lex was going over other details in his mind, considering different scenarios that he could encounter and how he would face them, when the door finally opened and a middle-aged man entered the room. He looked late 30s or early 40s at most and had a congenial smile on his face. He unbuttoned his suit and took the chair opposite to Lex before placing a file on the table. "I must apologize for Jessica's harshness in treating you," the man said, his voice as if talking to a young child. "Although her cultivation is high, she's never really encountered an actual unregistered cultivator or been in any dangerous situation. You know how kids are these days, thinking everything is a conspiracy." Lex smiled weakly, unsure of how he was supposed to respond. The man, as if understanding Lex's thought, gave out a chuckle and opened the file in front of him. "Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Hamid, I am the regional manager for cultivator registration. And you are Lex Williams, a new cultivator." Hamid slid the top page from the folder to Lex for him to observe. It was filled with Lex's private details, from his name, date of birth, family details, total estimated net worth, major life experiences, and more. Reading all that information about himself was surreal. Is this what criminals in movies felt like when the government pulled up their entire life history? Do not worry, I am not accusing you of any crime. Your history is mostly very clear-cut with no records of criminal activity other than the occasional pirating of a movie online. And believe it or not, you are not the only person to have accidentally discovered a cultivation technique and practiced it. So I'm not in trouble? Lex finally asked, feeling a bit of relief. Mostly, Hamid replied. Although you have not done anything wrong, you still need to register yourself, and your cultivation technique needs to be analyzed. It is not uncommon for people to discover a cultivation technique that seems fine, but is incomplete or causes problems later on. This is mostly for your own benefit, but since there is a precedent of cultivators exploding when trying to cross realms, this is also to ensure public safety. How will you check my cultivation technique? Lex asked, suddenly panicking again. He was not used to such a quick change from relief to panic so many times in one day. Hamid, however, smiled, as if he knew what Lex was thinking. Do not worry, we won't ask to see your cultivation technique. According to Section 7 of the Cultivation Organization's Code of Conduct, unless suspected of terrorism or other extremely dangerous illegal activities, it is prohibited to forcefully procure a cultivator's techniques and skills. Even then there are a great deal of restrictions and requirements. If you follow me, I will show you how we will check. It's a pretty standard check during registration, to be honest. Lex followed Hamid out the room and down the corridor into a long hallway. Wherever they went, Lex kept staring out the windows which showed a view of a countryside landscape, wondering if they had somehow teleported out of the city, or rather, how he could get such a teleporter if they did. Teleporting within the inn was fine, but if he could use it regularly to travel the world, that would be amazing. Hamid noticed him looking and chuckled again. That's augmented reality, he explained. It's a mix between technology and spirit formations to create an atmosphere and make it feel real. No one likes working underground, and this is good for morale. Oh, Lex exclaimed, suddenly feeling stupid. I thought we teleported somehow. I was amazed by the cultivation world, though I suppose mixing formations and technology is an amazing accomplishment in itself. Hamid laughed out loud and slapped Lex on the back, as if he had cracked a hilarious joke. The cultivation world is different, but don't let your head get pulled into science fiction. Not that I'm saying teleportation isn't real, it probably is, but that's not the kind of stuff people at our cultivation level can be exposed to. When you see something new, assume the simplest explanation is the correct one. The only difference between things such as formations or cultivation and traditional science is the use of spiritual energy. Normal people eat nutritious food to improve their health, and normal technology uses electricity and other normal physical traits to operate, whereas cultivators use spiritual energy to improve their bodies and run their formations. In a way, you can consider cultivation a different branch of science, where everything depends on spiritual energy. So for teleportation, it's not to say that it doesn't or can't exist, but rather that it would require a great deal of resources, engineering and spiritual energy beyond what is available to us. Cultivation isn't magic, if that's what you were thinking, and requires a great deal of studying, hard work and understanding. But all that is getting too hypothetical for you right now, I think, Hamid said, entering a lab full of various machines and a group of doctors walking around in lab coats. We should just focus on your registration. So Lex, tell me, are you ready to take your first steps into the cultivation world? I am, Lex answered, his eyes shining brightly. A lot of the things Hamid told him opened his mind and imagination. This was a truly exciting world. He couldn't wait to explore further. Somewhere far, far away in a house built on a mountain top, a man was swinging a double-sided sword, repeating the same motion time and time again. He was not bulky, but his body was packed with muscle, ready to explode with vicious strength. He did not falter, his stance did not weaken, and the momentum of each swing did not change. The man was focused. The man was determined. The man improved with each swing, and this improvement was like a drug that he was craving. His rhythm was suddenly interrupted by the sound of a creaking door, and a young, delicate-looking girl entered. She did not look perturbed by the angry glare the man was giving her, and walked up to him as if she was taking a stroll through a park. "What is it?" the man finally asked gruffly. "I just got a call from Mom. Someone in Bluebird ran a background check on Big Brother, and it seems they're getting ready to register him as a cultivator." The man's aura exploded. All the animals for miles around suddenly started fleeing, as if in a stampede, and the sun's light dimmed, as if the sun itself was afraid to be noticed by the man. "Investigate," said the man slowly, the word carrying an unspoken weight. "I'm already on it. Mom also said you're not allowed to return to Earth for the time being, so just keep focusing on Neelam's slash." The man clenched his empty fist, as if trying to suppress something, but eventually released his fist and returned to his practice. The girl left as if she did not notice his actions, acting completely nonchalant. If someone looked at the scene from afar, they would not see running monkeys and wolves, nor would they see crows and eagles escaping far away in the skies. Instead, they would see saber-toothed tigers and mammoths, they would see pterodactyls and dragons, they would see animals long thought extinct or myth, they would see mountains too large to be from Earth, and in the now darkened sky they would see a starry constellation completely distinct from the one visible on Earth. But to the girl and the man it was all too mundane to pay attention to. The man continued to swing and the young girl continued her casual stroll. Author's note: I'm adding this here to make sure the people who encounter this chapter get a chance to read this. I've noticed that the family being cultivators has been a point of contention for many readers, but I can assure you that the novel is not going for a cliché. Family disregarded him for being a waste-type trope or anything. Maybe the reveal is a little early, but regardless, this is something that had to happen for many things to make sense in the future. If you like the novel so far, continue to give it a chance. If you don't, then thanks for giving it a chance so far. Chapter 12. Test and Registration. The lab was a large, rectangular hall with various machines placed in glass cabins. A few people in lab coats were gathered around each machine discussing things in whispers. A few people were getting tested at various machines, but Lex could not tell what the machines were for. "Let's get the boring stuff out of the way, shall we?" Hamid said, grabbing a clipboard a doctor brought to him. "Since you are currently in the body tempering realm, your registration is currently quite simple. Other than testing your cultivation technique, we will need to collect a blood sample, gather your personal details, which we have already done, and finally make your personal identity token. That will conclude the requirements for registration at Bluebird. However, there are a few more tests for body tempering realm if you want to take them. Information from any additional test you take will be saved onto your token, and considering your results, it can help you with recruitment if you wish to join an organization. You can consider that later. Let's begin with testing your cultivation. Follow me." Hamid led Lex to a long cylindrical machine with a glass top that opened to a padded table. He spoke to a few people who quickly started preparing the machine. They opened the top and instructed Lex to lie down, attaching various node patches all over his body. Finally, after attaching 36 patches, they inserted 2 needles that were connected with wires into both of his arms. "The needles will send small, quick bursts of spiritual energy into your body," said Hamid as the machine was getting ready, "and the patches will detect how your body reacts." Body tempering cultivators temper their bodies so that they can accommodate spiritual energy in the body at later realms. Since that is the case, the spiritual energy that is put into your body should either be dispersed out of your body by your cultivation or should be absorbed evenly to temper your body. If the spiritual energy gets trapped anywhere in your body, that means there is something wrong with your cultivation technique. Lex listened to his explanation, though he was not really worried about his cultivation at all. Although different in the beginning, regal embrace should not be underestimated at all. Eventually the machine started, and immediately Lex a sharp tingling in his arms near the needles, as if he were receiving a jolt of electricity, though the jolt barely lasted. He could feel that it was supposed to be traveling through his body, but disappeared before it could even exit his arms. After a few seconds he received a second jolt, this time a slightly stronger one, however the outcome was the same. This continued for a few minutes, but regardless of how strong the jolt was, it never went past his arms. Although Hamid didn't comment on what was happening, Lex could see him trying to hide his surprised expression. Eventually the machine stopped and the patches and needles were removed. "Congratulations," said Hamid as he helped Lex off the table, "your cultivation technique is extremely stable. You should have no trouble cultivating all the way to golden core based on the stability of this cultivation technique, though if you wish to cultivate higher you will have to return for a different kind of test to ensure absolute safety." "Golden core?" Lex repeated, a hint of a question in his tone. He still did not have a detailed understanding of cultivation. He was hoping Hamid would fill in the blanks. "Of course, I forgot you do not have anyone to guide you in the cultivation world. Well, fret not, should you join an organization they will guide you carefully on your path. Considering your current cultivation, you should not worry about it anyway. It will probably be a very long time before that becomes relevant to you. Come, let's take a blood sample." Another doctor came at Hamid's call with a fresh syringe and extracted enough of Lex's blood to fill a small vial. Lex had to admit he was a little impressed at how easy it was for all these needles to poke him, as based on his understanding it should no longer be so easy to penetrate his skin. "Now to finish off with getting you your personal identity token. This shouldn't take too long, follow me." Hamid led Lex to a different part of the lab to what looked like a 3D printer that was printing out what looked like a black and red poker chip. This token is built using a spiritual metal, combined with the latest formation as well as modern technology. Once it is complete it can become personalized to you by dripping a drop of blood on it. In it will be a Bluebird certificate of approval, signifying that you have gone through the Bluebird registration process and are recognized as a non-hostile entity. You need to carry it with you at all times, as it can be sensed by authorized Bluebird personnel. If you are caught without it on your person, you will be treated as if you had intent to do harm and will be detained pending an investigation on your activities. Which is why I must stress this again, always keep it on you. If you ever lose it, report it immediately to a Bluebird office near you to get a new one, though you have to pay for any replacements. That's also why Jessica treated you so harshly. As a cultivator without a token you are a suspected threat, even if your actual cultivation is low. Other than that, you can also scan the token like a QR code to access the Bluebird network, an online platform for cultivators, or access other cultivator networks as a guest, though that would limit what you are able to do. Hamid continued to make introductions for Lex while they waited, and finally after a short 20 minutes the token was complete. After ensuring that everything was in order, Hamid handed Lex the token along with a prick so he could draw some blood for it. Lex was filled with some anticipation, but after absorbing the drop of blood the token didn't do anything special, nor did Lex feel any kind of connection from it. That was to be expected though. Hamid already explained that to view the data stored on the token he would have to scan it as if it were a QR code. Hamid also introduced some of the other tests he could take, which included tests for physical strength, stamina, reaction, intellect, learning gradient, and many more. After thinking about it for a moment, Lex decided not to take the tests currently. First of all, he didn't want to leave records for his capabilities since his cultivation wasn't ordinary, and he could not predict how his stats would change. Secondly, although Hamid did his best to seem friendly, the frequency with which he brought up regulations, surveillance and security measures, Lex started to feel as if things weren't so simple. He wanted to learn more before he made any decisions. Lex even asked Hamid why security was so strict and how dangerous the cultivation world really was. All he got for a reply was that as long as he stayed in a Bluebird supervised area, followed the law and avoided shady people he had no reason to be concerned. If that couldn't be considered dodging a question, Lex didn't know what could. When all the procedures were complete he asked if he could leave, and Hamid escorted Lex out of the building. He didn't encounter Jessica again, but he quickly put that out of his mind. He had gotten a lot of new information today, he needed to absorb it and see how he could use it to his advantage. His drive to make MP had increased, and he wanted to increase his cultivation as quickly as possible. It seemed a little unfair how the protagonists in the novels never met cultivators much stronger than them in the real world, and so could always manage a solution. He apparently didn't have that luxury. For a good portion of the day he felt helpless. It wasn't a feeling he enjoyed. It wasn't a feeling he wanted to experience again. Chapter 13. Bluebird Portal. Bluebird Portal. Even though Lex was at the peak of his physical fitness, he felt exhausted when he got home. He picked up an inordinate amount of Chinese takeout on his way as well as a pack of cigarettes. He wasn't really a smoker, he paid extra attention to ensure he never got addicted, and never kept any on him. He'd only occasionally buy them when he was feeling stressed and would quickly discard the pack after smoking a few. Setting his food down on a table and turning on Netflix, he quickly set the table with plates, juices, some water, and chopsticks. But before he started his feast, he pulled a stool by his open window, lit his cigarette, and took a long, deep drag. It had been a few weeks since he last smoked. It felt nice. He took this time to look out on the traffic below, the people coming and going, the sounds of the city, and everything else in between. Even with all its hustle and bustle, viewed from a distance, the rhythm of the city seemed so peaceful. When he finally finished his smoke, Lex quickly blew whatever smoke he could out of the window and sprayed some air freshener. He washed his hands and sat down, ready to consume more food than was probably healthy, and let his thoughts wander. So far there was limited progress towards making more MP, meaning there was none. He couldn't complete any quests right now, and since Bastet and Falak hadn't left their rooms, there was no opportunity to try and sell them stuff from the gift shop. If his luck panned out, someone might find the golden key he left behind and actually be able to use it, but there was no telling when that might be. He could try and see if there was some way he could give keys to cultivators, or at least find an opportunity to have them discover it on their own, since he felt it was unsafe to let anyone know he had any connection to them. In cultivation novels, the protagonist always auctioned items off or sold them to some giant trading company, but that was unlikely here, as he literally had no idea what technology, typical or spiritual, could be used to trace the key back to him. Not to mention, he was absolutely sure the token he was given had some kind of tracking function as well, so he didn't want to take any unnecessary risks. If nothing changed, the best opportunity he could see was to wait a week and travel to the new world to see what opportunities it presented. But he would have to prepare for that as well, in whatever way he could. At some point through his meal, he scanned his token and entered the Bluebird online portal to investigate its features, and they were numerous. There were forums, chat rooms, news that wasn't available to the public, trading platforms, and much more. He took his time going through the portal the rest of the day. Every few hours he'd ask Mary if Bastet left her room, and the answer was always no. He also learned a lot of basic information that he'd been missing for a while. The first and most important thing he learnt was the first few cultivation levels. 1. Mortals, normal people. 2. Body tempering, using spiritual energy to temper the body so it could absorb spiritual energy at later cultivation levels. 3. Kai training, beginning to absorb spiritual energy in the body. 4. Foundation realm, use the absorbed spiritual energy to create a foundation. 5. Golden core, form a core in the body to store concentrated spiritual energy. Cultivation levels above golden core were not mentioned at all, and even golden core themselves were mentioned with extreme reverence. Something interesting he encountered was a cultivation version of the social media platform Twitter called Tempest, where many high-leveled cultivators had huge followings, along with various companies and organizations. Most cultivators, he discovered, were at body tempering and Kai cultivation, with the numbers dropping drastically when it came to foundation realm. Any random foundation cultivator had at least a few million followers from over the globe. Another interesting thing he discovered was what was normally referred to as spiritual equipment in novels was called spirit tech, and had a huge variety. The prices varied too, so he found household spirit tech for cleaning, tidying, laundry, and even cooking for relatively cheap. But he also found body armor and weapons, the prices for which went in the hundreds of thousands even at the cheapest models. Furthermore, one had to present one's token when receiving such items and undergo some verification. Some random, but interesting spirit tech Lex saw included fully functioning prosthetics, bioengineered nanobots that the user injected in his or her body that automatically healed the user whenever they got hurt, of various assortments of flying devices, and fully immersive VR. He also saw various seminars that were held monthly for multiple organizations. Lex checked a few to see what kind of organizations there were, since he'd heard about them so much, and broadly categorized them into 3 different groups: ones that conducted R&D, those that procured various resources, and those that simply banded people together to protect themselves and their interests. Most organizations only gave very loose descriptions of their activities and purposes, such as developing the latest on spiritual farming technologies or mining for blue Telterra, whatever that is. For more details you would have to join, but what they did provide was a very detailed list of benefits they provided for each member. None of this specifically sounded illegal to Lex, but the level of secrecy made him cautious. Another thing he found, something that interested him specifically, was a self-defense class for beginner cultivators. For someone going to another planet, this sounded essential. He tried to find the closest one to him and sign up, and his first class would be in a couple of days. The last thing that he discovered, and the thing that completely surprised him, was the fact that cultivators were already inhabiting the Moon and Mars. And not just a few. Apparently there were quite a few cities there already, with extensive travel between the celestial bodies. Considering that he could travel between worlds, this should not have been such a huge surprise, but this completely changed a fundamental truth he maintained about the world he lived in. It came as a bigger surprise than he could have imagined. But traveling to either the Moon or Mars wasn't easy. He had to meet a few requirements, but he was kind of excited about that possibility as well. Just a few days ago he thought life was so boring, and now suddenly it was so exciting. Chapter 14. Marlowe's Self-Defense for Beginners. Marlowe's self-defense for beginners. At a specific penthouse in New York, a small child had dozed off in the living room in front of the TV. Drool flowed down the side of his face, and the various colors of the cartoon that were flashing on his innocent face made him look very adorable. His mother, who was standing over him, was smiling at her child, but her smile was tinged with sadness and anxiety. After a short while she picked him up and took him to bed. Before tucking herself in beside him, she noticed he had some kind of golden toy key in his hand, but he was holding onto it too tightly, so she didn't try to force it from him. It was just the two of them living there, and it was the last of her inheritance she had received from her family. For the past few weeks she had been trying to find a job, but she'd never worked anywhere in her life. Although she'd graduated from a prestigious college, that was over a decade ago. Without any relevant experience, no one was willing to take a chance on her. She could ask someone she knew for a favor and try to get a job that way. However, up until now she had been too proud to do so. Maybe it was time to put away her pride soon. She closed her eyes and tried to go to sleep, tears streaming down her face. Next morning Lex stretched, and as he tried to rouse his drowsy self, it was 11 a.m. so he couldn't even say he was waking up early. In fact, he wasn't waking up at all. Last night he'd turned on his PC to play a few games and blow off some steam, but he was enthralled when he discovered his reaction speed and accuracy had improved immensely. Game after game he broke all his previous records, and he was on the longest win streak of his life. His excitement had gripped him, and regardless of what game he played, his performance had improved readily. Briefly he even considered starting a career as a video game streamer, though tragically he had to force himself away from that thought as his focus had to remain the Midnight Inn. Still, he played until right now when he could no longer ignore his rumbling stomach. Forcefully tearing himself away from the computer he washed his face, before finding himself in front of the TV again, with various Chinese leftovers in front of him. Truly it had been a while since he had been so decadent. After enjoying himself by enveloping himself in laziness for a couple more hours, he changed into a tracksuit and went out. There was no progress on the inn, but he couldn't really let things rest without putting in any work at all. Jessica told him he was using too much strength in his handshake, and in fact last night he ended up breaking a keyboard completely in his excitement while gaming. There was an assortment of other things in his apartment that had suffered some damage due to his carelessness, such as furniture, doorknobs, walls, and even his shower during a slipping incident. He had to learn how to better control his strength, and currently through exercise was the only thing he could think of. Tomorrow he would have his first self-defense lesson for new cultivators, and he would use that opportunity to ask about it. But until then he would have to make do. He started with a light jog, focusing completely on his legs and the strength he used. He controlled his stride as best as he could and did his best to control how much force he was using. Unfortunately, after around half an hour, a careless misstep caused him to completely tear his joggers. He bought himself several new pairs and spent the day utilizing his time focusing on trying to control his strength. He wouldn't admit it, but secretly he felt very giddy every time he accidentally tore a shirt while flexing too much. The next day he woke up bright and early and got ready for his first class. He wasn't sure what to expect, however he dressed up in a new tracksuit he purchased yesterday. At 7:50 a.m. he found himself in front of a private auditorium with a security guard at the entrance. He flashed his Bluebird token to the man, who promptly moved out of the way and let Lex in. Inside he discovered that there were only a few people, 2 girls and 5 guys who were chatting softly with one another. In the center of the auditorium was a large arena with padded floors and a large man, sitting on a folding chair with his eyes closed. When he entered, the group of 7 who were chatting turned to look at him, and after a moment one of the guys waved him over. "Hey man, name's Larry. You a new member too?" "Yeah, name's Lex," he replied, observing the rather frail-looking man. He noticed that none of the 7 people looked very fit or muscular, though he was sure they were at least cultivators since that was the minimum requirement to attend this class. It was a little strange, as though he couldn't consider himself very muscular. His body was in much better shape than before. He used to think that cultivating naturally made one look more fit, but that might not be the case, it seemed. Welcome. We're all new as well. It's only been a few weeks myself since I became a cultivator." More people should be coming soon, I guess, since the first class is free. This is a great chance to make a few connections, if you know what I mean. Larry winked at Lex before subtly hinting towards the two women in the group. Lex smiled weakly. Even as a cultivator, this guy's focus was only on girls. The others from the group introduced themselves, and it seemed all the people here were rogue cultivators who had either inherited cultivation from their families or found cultivation manuals somewhere by accident. It seemed that was a more common occurrence than Lex had imagined. What surprised Lex the most, however, was that all 5 guys planned on joining the military once after today's free self-defense lesson. Apparently the army offered the best benefits to lone cultivators and helped them further their cultivation. The 2 girls were friends and didn't share any details on their plans. However, Lex got the sense that they also were either going to join or already had joined some organization. Another thing he learnt was that almost all of them took a few weeks to stabilize their cultivation before they felt confident enough in their control over their strength. Apparently, it was very common for new cultivators to be unable to control themselves, even worse than he was it seemed. A few more people came as time went by, and at 8:30 the large man finally opened his eyes and got up from his chair. Although he made no noise, he grabbed everyone's attention. Aware of the effect he had on the crowd, he grinned slyly and spoke. Welcome to Marlowe's self-defense for new cultivators. Everyone here has entered a new world of cultivation. Some of you may be familiar with this world already, and some of you may be new. Either way, let me be the one to help you take your first steps as you begin your new life. His words were welcoming, but the manic excitement in his eyes, his wild hair, patchy stubble and his muscle-bulging towering figure told a different story. Lex gulped. Were all cultivators a little crazy? Chapter 15, Sudden Quest. Come, enter the arena everyone. Marlowe exclaimed, his body shaking with vigor as he spoke. Everyone line up next to each other and let me take a look at you. Everyone quickly lined up nervously and stared at the giant man who was towering above them. Though he was not using his cultivation to pressure them, just his presence seemed to achieve the effect. 15 young and talented people, ready to join my class, he said, his tone sounding all too rehearsed. 15 people with hopes and dreams of success and triumph, of glamour and gold. But first you have to live long enough to achieve that. According to a survey in 2019, only 47% of people who became body cultivators in that year progressed in their cultivation, 29% stagnated exactly where they were, and the remaining 24% died. He paused for a moment to let everyone absorb that information. Lex could not speak for others, but that percentage truly surprised him. 1/4 of all new cultivators that year died. That was scarily high, and this was supposed to be a civilized society with organizations such as Bluebird maintaining the peace. Now I'm not saying that everyone who died was killed, but you'd have to look far and hard for a body cultivator who died of something like a heart attack. That's why, if you want to survive and grow, you should always consider your security. If you progress too fast, you might attract the attention of someone whose cultivation has been lagging, wondering if you have some kind of treasure that helped you along. If you progress too slow, you might attract the ire of someone who thinks you're using up resources that could be better used by them instead. The world is full of dangerous people, and one must know how to protect yourself. And that's why you are here today. To learn to protect yourself and survive. Marlowe was practically yelling with excitement at this point, a wild grin painting his face. But today, we won't be doing any personalized training. No, today you will only be getting a taste of the hard work and dedication that will be required for you to take this course. That's why the first lesson is free, so that if you don't think you can do it, you can leave. Once you enroll in the course, you cannot quit. It'll be in your contract. I have a reputation to uphold, and I can't have people saying that my students are easy to get rid of. So don't bother introducing your names and backgrounds yet. First, introduce me to your guts. Introduce me to your will. Introduce me to the passion in your hearts to seize the cultivation world and snatch all its glory. Marlowe burst into a manic laughter that shook the entire arena, and his overwhelming persona had all but intimidated most of his class into running away right then and there. Lex himself was considering never coming back after the introductory class. This guy was just a little too much. That is, until he heard a notification from the system. Sudden quest initiated. With a great personality and abundant energy, Marlowe is a great candidate to serve as a valet for the inn. Hire Marlowe as your first valet. Quest time limit. 1 month quest reward. 1 small staff dormitory. 1000 MP. Plus 1 midnight inn level quest failure punishment. Minus 1000 MP if host is unable to pay. It will result in immediate death. Lex's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he read the notification, and he was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. A sudden quest was a good way to earn some rewards that he sorely needed right now, but the punishment for failure was too steep. And the quest didn't seem easy either. This Marlowe fellow was too excitable. He had no idea how he would recruit him. How would? Lex's thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Marlowe, who finally stopped laughing and clapped his hands, upon which 15 uniformed, identical-looking men entered the room and stood before each of the participants, a stoic look on their faces. "These are my minions, ordered from Rent-A-Minion. Each one of them will teach you how to defend against a certain kind of attack, and then attack you. The only way to stop is to successfully block the attack. Otherwise they will not stop unless you pass out. So you better pay attention and do your best." Everyone was shocked. What kind of class was it where they attacked the student until they passed out? But before anyone could voice a complaint, each student was approached by a minion. The one that approached Lex showed him various moves he could use. The minion would try to distract him with a punch, and then trip him backwards by putting a leg behind Lex's and pushing him. Lex would first have to avoid the punch and then the attempt to trip him. He could do so by simply stepping back, blocking, evading, counter-attacking and more. The minion, although not very talkative, spoke slowly and calmly, a large contrast to Marlowe, and gave many demonstrations to Lex on each possible maneuver he could do. He repeated as many times as Lex asked, but when Lex asked something unrelated to the content of the class, such as what exactly was Rent-A-Minion, the minion would not answer. Finally, after 20 minutes, Lex felt ready to start. In this time many of the other students had already started, and they were all being taught to avoid different kinds of attacks. The only common theme was that everyone who had started was beaten up. One of the students, a young fellow, quickly asked to quit and said he wanted to stop. Unfortunately, the minion did not stop. He just kept attacking. Eventually, the man accidentally tripped backwards and evaded the minion's attack, triggering the condition for the minion to stop. As soon as he realized the minion had stopped, he ran out of the class with a mix of crying and yelling at Marlowe. Marlowe, however, only laughed and seemed to enjoy being scolded. All the other students, however, were thoroughly scared. That's why Lex made sure to absorb everything the minion had to teach before he started. The result? He gravely underestimated the speed of the minion and got punched right in the face, not even gaining the opportunity to avoid the rest of the attack. Fortunately, the punch didn't seem to hurt him as much as it hurt the other students, and other than being slightly shocked, he was fine. The minion's speed wasn't otherworldly or insanely fast, it was just the normal speed for someone trained in combat. As someone who had never been in a fight before though, Lex gravely underestimated just how fast that regular speed was. He picked himself up and readied himself for the minion's next attack, fueled by a mix of vindictive energy aimed at the minion and a desire to succeed. The second time he successfully dodged the punch, but it was by pulling back too fast. That caused him to lose his balance momentarily, a flaw the minion took quick advantage of. The third time, trying not to move in such a haphazard way as last time, Lex tried to be more deliberate in his dodge, but was punched again. This continued for over an hour. Almost all the other students had succeeded accidentally or passed out. 2 of the students had succeeded flawlessly and were invited by Marlowe for a private talk. Only Lex was still continuing at this point. It was mostly because the minion's attacks were unable to actually hurt Lex, though they did irritate him endlessly. He didn't get tired either from all the exercise, nor had his will to succeed diminished. He even forgot about why he was doing this. His focus was only on being able to evade the minion perfectly. That wasn't to say he hadn't made progress. More than once he had actually dodged the minion and twice even blocked him, but Lex was never satisfied, as he knew that so long as the fight continued after those 2 attacks, his dodges and blocks left him in a bad position to continue. Eventually, Marlowe stopped him, waking him from his reverie of practice. But when he stopped and looked towards Marlowe, who was grinning at him malevolently, his entire body trembled. This giant dude was definitely crazy. Lex was worried for his future. Chapter 16, Introductions. Excellent, excellent. The madman roared as patted Lex on the shoulders with gusto, shaking him to his very core. Marlowe's cultivation was definitely very high. I love it when a masochist joins the class. They have so much energy, so much vigor. I'm not a masochist. Lex quickly defended himself, but Marlowe didn't seem to be paying attention. You can stop for today, I have other appointments to keep, so I have to close down for now. The next class is on Saturday, I hope I'll see you there. That's when the fun really begins. Oh, and all faction and organization members are welcome to join my class except Ultimate Fighting Fortress. His expression suddenly darkened and for a moment he seemed lost in thought, but quickly recovered. So if you were planning on joining someone, you should not be worried that coming to me might be a conflict of interest. My class has quite the reputation. In fact, if you pass my class before joining the army, you can get recruited directly at the rank of captain. It's quite beneficial. I don't plan on joining anyone at the moment, Lex said, rubbing his aching shoulders. And I do plan on continuing your classes. I am very attached to my life, you know, I'd like to keep it if I can. Marlowe burst into a roaring laughter at Lex's comment, and gave Lex another pat on the back that sent him flying off the stage. That's the spirit. See you Saturday then. The full self-defense course costs $1.7 million. You can pay upfront or sign a working clause since you won't be having an organization sponsor you. Marlowe walked away, still laughing, the floor trembling at his footsteps with a line of minions following him. Lex left, ignoring the fact that he had once again ripped his sneakers and tracksuit, thinking of ways he could recruit Marlowe as a valet without revealing his identity. He seemed like a very straightforward man, but Lex would have to spend more time with him to figure out his personality completely. It was currently Thursday morning, so the next class was 2 days away. It was enough time for him to plan how to try and get closer to the excitable giant. He returned home and went directly into the shower. It occurred to him that he wasn't hurt at all, and he was only sore where Marlowe had patted him, whereas everyone else who had left the session looked considerably harmed. He smiled. Regal embrace was already impressive, and it would only get better as he raised his cultivation. The next 2 days went by quickly. Bastet and Falak still had not made an appearance and no one had used his golden key, so there was no progress there. He had however spent a lot of time planning on what he would take with him when he traveled to the other world for the first time. He didn't want to be too conspicuous, so he had prepared a backpack with a first aid kit, a Swiss Army knife, a flashlight, some rations and a fire starter. He would add more things as he thought of them, and currently he was too poor or unqualified for spirit tech that might be useful. He had also spent more time trying to get used to his strength. He exercised for strength control and played video games for delicate control, trying to avoid breaking his controller. That's totally the only reason he pulled an all-nighter playing games. Finally Saturday morning he went back to Marlowe's follow-up class, and surprisingly only 2 other people from the previous 15 showed up. A young woman Lex hadn't really talked with, and surprisingly Larry. Larry was one of those who had been beaten till he passed out, and judging from his behavior before class Lex hadn't expected him to be so dedicated as to come back for another class. But here he was, bruised but smiling and trying to flirt with the woman. Lex, my good man, good to see you again. I knew you were a tough one when I saw you, unlike all the others who ran away. Come, let me introduce you. This is Matilda. She cleared her training last time pretty quickly. Hello, Matilda said, her tone very formal, as she looked at Lex. It was clear that although Larry had been trying to get closer to her, she didn't want to become too familiar. Matilda was a fair bit shorter than the 2 of them, and healthier too, but she had a handsome face. Is it just us or will more people come? Lex asked after greeting Matilda, but Larry shook his head. I expect more won't join. Honestly, Marlowe has a bit of a reputation. His training gets only tougher as it progresses, and if you don't have a strong mentality you can't really get through. Most people just want to pass his class because you get better perks from your organization if you do, but passing it is not easy. Is that why you're here? Lex asked. He was slightly curious about Larry now, and it wasn't a bad idea to try and develop a few connections of his own. A potential future army captain wasn't a bad person to know. Me? I guess you could just say I'm trying to make the most of my time. Larry's usually chipper was laced with a tinge of defeat and exhaustion as he said so, but he quickly recovered as if nothing happened. What about you, my talented fellow? When I left you were still taking quite the beating. I didn't think I'd see you again. I just want to learn how to defend myself. I don't know much about the cultivation world, but everything I've heard and seen makes me think it's a very dangerous place. Indeed, came a roaring voice from behind them, followed by the hulking Marlowe with his trademark grin. Life is hard and living is harder. A man must know how to defend himself. A woman more so. Compared to last time, when Marlowe was dressed casually, this time he came wearing a suit. His hair was properly kempt and he had a clean shave. Though his eyes were still filled with madness, he looked much more civilized. Once again, I would like to welcome you to Marlowe's self-defense for new cultivators. Just by being here today, you have proven yourself worthy of the title of cultivators. Just by being here today, you have earned the right to tell me your names. Just by being here today, you have earned the right to hear my self-introduction. Marlowe paused and took a look at his 3 future students, carefully studying each one of their faces as if he was etching them into his memory forever. You may have done your own research about me before joining this class, but nonetheless I will tell you a little bit about myself, so you know whose hands you will be in the future. He paused for a moment, looking at his small audience, before continuing with a hint of solemnity in his voice. My name is Hanson Marlowe Bravi Roman III. The Roman III comes not from my family having predecessors with the same name, but is something I added myself for each time I faced death and emerged victorious. For each time I emerged a new, stronger man. The first time was when I was 8 years old, and my village was attacked by a pack of jackals that had gone through spiritual awakening. For hours I escaped through the wilderness, sometimes running, sometimes tumbling, carrying a newborn child with me until I eventually ran into an army unit conducting training in the wild. I led them back to my village, only to discover nothing left. Only the child and I survived. He paused once again, his grin completely gone from his face this time as looked his 3 students in their eyes. He studied their expressions in silence, then he continued. The second time was when I was 28 years old, during the Australian beast tide of 1981. A new beast alpha was expanding its territory and many other alphas were using that opportunity to expand their own territories. I was a member of the NASA private military at the time, and we were stationed near where the beast tide originated. 4 days, Marlowe paused again, to give emphasis to his words. When the beast tide emerged, our base was overwhelmed and for 4 days I was stuck in what was a red zone, surrounded by enraged beasts with no knowledge of what was going on as we had lost communication. Out of the entire army base, I was the only survivor. When the UN response team found me, I was hiding in the carcass of an inner core level beast that I had killed. At the time I had only just entered the Foundation realm. Larry visibly trembled when he heard Marlowe and Matilda's complexion visibly paled. Lex was also quite shocked. An inner core level beast was equivalent to a golden core cultivator. The third time was during the War of '99 between Novocorp and the Pelican sect in Western Europe. Novocorp had provoked quite a few people here in the US as well, and I was acting as an escort for a diplomatic mission to France to see if we could potentially ally to put pressure on them, but were ambushed en route. 36 Golden Core experts against a team of 9. That incident later came to be known as the Day of the Red Dawn. Every time a Golden Core expert dies, the sky is covered in a red hue by the spirit energy released from the body, and that day the sun rose to a red sky. Every time I've been closest to death, it was during something unforeseen. It was during something no one could have predicted, but that didn't change the fact that any of those incidents could have killed me. That is why a man must know how to defend himself and how to survive. The world is a tough place and dying in it is the easiest thing to do. It's surviving and living on that's hard. Chapter 17. What is self-defense? Lex found it hard to believe that the giant in front of him could be so profound, but it was exactly that giant's life and his words that gave him goosebumps. Dying was easy, living was hard. At first it was a strange thought, but it reminded Lex of all the struggles he'd ever had in life. He recalled the worst and toughest parts of his life. Although his life up till now was very ordinary, no one could claim there weren't parts of it where he felt very miserable. Living truly was difficult sometimes, but it was worth it. He was ready to go through harder difficulties for an even better life. Now one by one, introduce yourselves. Give as much or as little detail as you want, it doesn't matter. Ladies first, Larry quickly said as he looked towards Matilda with an honest smile. Her lips twitched, but she controlled her annoyance and focused on Marlowe. My name is Matilda Ross. I am 22 years old and inherited my cultivation method in my brother's will. I want to continue on this path and not only survive, but also flourish. But first, I need to focus on survival, so I am here to learn how to do that. Marlowe gave the woman an accepting nod, his expression still serious. Lex almost found it unusual to see the man without some manic expression. I guess I'm next, huh? Said Larry with a hint of reluctance. I have a bit of ambition, you could say. I want to do big things, and for that I need a solid start. Going through this class will really help with that, so I'm here. He smiled weakly at his fellow students, as if trying to portray a weak determination. My name is Larry Dershaw, he finished, his volume lowering almost to a whisper, yet its effect was drastic. Marlowe's expression changed to that of surprise, as if he had heard something truly unexpected. After a moment though, Marlowe's expression returned to its former serious state, and he made a short comment. A man can be defeated, but he cannot give up. Your journey may be long, but every breath you take is a victory against your enemies. After that, all 3 of them turned to look at Lex, who was slightly distracted. It seemed Larry had a story behind him, and Matilda too for that matter. But thinking about that was for later. Right now he had to focus. My name is Lex Williams. I am 23 years old and I was only just introduced to the world of cultivation. I don't have any grand ambitions or anything like that. I just feel like the world is very dangerous, and that if I am not prepared for it I won't even know how I died. The difference between what the world is really like and I used to think it was is too big. I want to be better prepared. Lex's words were very simple, and he tried to downplay his life as well as himself so that no one would think anything interesting is going on in it. He thought he had done a good job. The look on Marlowe's face, however, said otherwise. He had a knowing smirk on his face as he eyed Lex up and down. It was quite a contrast to how he responded to the previous 2, but he made no comments. Eventually, he addressed all 3 together. Matilda, Larry, Lex, the three of you have an admirable will to show up here after last class. You have also demonstrated a knowledge of your current weaknesses as well as a desire to improve. To me that is admirable, but actions are the best way to communicate. Take these and sign them to officially start your classes. The training period will be a total of 3 months, during which you are not allowed to miss any classes. If you cannot attend a class or need to miss an activity, you will have to inform me prior with a good reason. Otherwise it will be deemed as a violation of your contract. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I have a reputation to uphold. Anyone who has attended my class has a 87% better survival rate compared to other cultivators in up to level blue danger situations. I won't have that number drop because a student is too lazy to complete my training. Marlowe handed the 3 contracts and gave them time to review them. The contract only had a few main points, first about the payment and the forms acceptable. The preferred method was actually 1 bloodline stone, after which were 5 spirit stones, after which was cash, and finally an employment contract if you were unable to pay. It also accepted sponsorships from any organization that might be backing the student. The second clause was that if a student were to miss a single class, without sufficient reason he would be immediately expelled and could not claim any relation to Marlowe or his self-defense class under penalty of law. The third clause was an unusual one. It stated that, so long as a student attended even a single paid class with Marlowe, even if they did not continue with the full course, the student was not allowed to join an organization called Ultimate Fight Fortress, and if this clause were to be violated, Marlowe reserved the right to challenge the student to legal trial by Combat LTC. Lex didn't know what that meant, but a quick search on the Bluebird portal told him it was basically a government-sanctioned death fight. Whoever participated could kill the opponent in combat if they wished, suffering no convictions or punishments. The rest of the contract was pretty basic, and covered stuff like Marlowe would not be responsible for injuries caused during training, etc. After going through it, Lex signed it, only to realize everyone else had already done so and were waiting for him. Finally, once the formalities signing, setting up payment plans or methods, etc. were completed, Marlowe brought them back to the arena where 3 minions were waiting for them. As of now, for the next 3 months, we have officially established a relationship as students and as a teacher. Before we begin training practically, I would like to impart some of my experience onto you. The most important thing to teach you is what self-defense actually is, and what it looks like for you now, and what it will look like for you in the future. Some of you may have an image in your head that we will be learning martial arts, or some form of hand-to-hand combat, but that is a misconception. While combat skills are absolutely essential, you must realize that combat between cultivators and mortals is very different. Right now you are basically just a slightly stronger mortal, if you will. This is because in the body tempering stage there aren't really any cultivation skills you can use. Later on, however, you will learn them and be able to use them. That doesn't, however, mean that right now you won't encounter an enemy that can't use cultivation skills. How do you deal with a situation where you encounter an enemy who can use cultivation skills? How do you deal with an enemy who is in the same realm, but higher level than you? What do you do if you encounter a beast? How do you deal with a hostile mortal carrying a gun? How to survive if you are being targeted by a spirit formation? If you are being poisoned? How to defend yourself when suffering from legal persecution? I will cover the basics on everything I have mentioned so far, and teach you with varying depths how to react in those situations. Everything that is a part of your syllabus is a result of my direct personal experiences, and I will do what I can to teach you how to react in those situations. Of course, this is only a beginner's course, so I will only cover stuff to a certain degree. If you wish to learn to a greater level, you can take up my intermediate and advanced courses later as well. Lex had to admit he was fairly impressed by Marlowe. The man was extremely professional, and had not let his hysterical tendencies loose during the class so far. It was no wonder he was so reputable. Let me ask you all a question. In any given situation, what do you think self-defense looks like? The 3 students looked at one another, before Larry hesitantly answered, ensuring your own survival. Before Larry could finish his answer, Marlowe let out a deafening roar. Wrong. Self-defense means to kill your opponent as quickly and efficiently as possible. If the source of your danger is dead, then by default you are safe. Marlowe burst into a loud and hysterical laughter after he finished saying. It was extremely brief, almost as if Lex had imagined it completely, but it seemed as if the minions looked at the 3 students with eyes full of pity. Lex felt like beating himself up for believing Marlowe was professional. The man was a giant child hopped up on a dozen energy drinks. Lex was once again worried for his future. Chapter 18. Preparing for the New World. Once the giant man was done laughing, he looked at the somewhat defeated faces of his 3 new students and grinned. Of course, this definition doesn't yet apply to you yet. Right now you are weak. The ideal scenario for you right now is to hole up somewhere and steadily increase your cultivation to kite training at the very least. Even if you go ahead and join an organization, they would not put you through any dangerous situation so as to avoid needless casualties, but life is unpredictable. Situations can change quickly. So the question is, if you find yourself in a dangerous situation, what should you do? Marlowe's words were phrased as a question, but he did not wait for an answer. Instead, he signaled his three minions, who quickly picked up an assorted pile of wooden panels and began putting together what seemed like a maze. Your first and most important lesson will begin now. It won't cover something as mundane as combat. The most important aspect of self-defense for you all is to learn to analyze and identify dangerous situations, and quickly map out your best course of actions. The madman grinned, as was his norm, like a psychopath. This is always my favorite lesson. The three students trembled, and the look of pity on the minions' faces was blatant now. It was 7 p.m. when Lex got home, and though it was not so late in the day, Lex could not remember when he had been so exhausted last. He didn't have the energy to shower properly, so he just lay in the bath and began filling it with warm water. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts wander, occasionally appreciating how the water seemed to massage his sore muscles. Yes, his sore muscles. Marlowe had noticed how the minions on the same cultivation level as him didn't seem to push him much, so he had undergone his training with minions at the 7th stage of body tempering. Most of his bruises had already healed on the way home, but when he left Marlowe's arena, even his own mother would not have recognized him. Larry wasn't much better than him. Matilda, to Lex's great surprise, performed exceedingly well, and Marlowe had decided to give her lessons separate from the two boys so that she wouldn't be held back by their level. Lex was a little annoyed, not at Marlowe or his training, or anything of that sort. His annoyance was focused on the cultivation novels he'd read. In just a few lines, the novels declared the MC would train for months or years on end, always pushing himself to the limit beyond any of his peers. It seemed so easy on paper, yet the novels never missed the gritty details of how difficult training was. It never mentioned the feeling of constantly being out of breath, of feeling extreme heat, of hearing your own heart beat so loud it was hard to focus on anything else. The novels never mentioned how sticky it felt to be in sweaty clothes all day, or how draining it was not just physically but also mentally. Lex kept complaining to himself until he slowly drowsed away in the tub. He was woken up with a start when he heard his phone ring. He hadn't even realized when he'd fallen asleep, and now his bathtub was overflowing, flooding his bathroom. Quickly he turned off the water and unplugged the bathtub drain to let some of the water flow out. After rubbing his eyes and trying to rouse himself a bit, he reached for his phone. It was a call from his youngest sister. "Hey Moon," he answered in a teasing voice. "Is it snowing in the Sahara? How did you remember to call me?" His youngest sister, who was probably 16 or 15, he wasn't sure, he didn't remember exactly, wasn't actually called Moon, it was just a nickname she had since she was young. "Haha, very funny." Moon answered in an annoyed voice. "I wouldn't be calling if you weren't causing trouble everywhere. When are you coming to visit? You know Mom and Dad are very angry at big sister Liz, but she won't listen to them about anything, so they just spend all their time complaining to me. You know she only listens to you. When are you coming home? I can't take much more of this, I'm telling you. If you don't come home soon, I'm going to tell Mom we should all visit you in New York." "No, don't." Lex didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had a bit of an unusual family. His parents were archaeologists, but not the kind that worked in one place. They worked with various groups and had to travel all over the world for their projects. As such, his childhood was filled with traveling all over the world, and he was mostly homeschooled. When he was younger, he enjoyed it quite a bit, but eventually he got tired of constantly traveling, so when he left for college he had become completely independent. His two younger sisters, however, stuck with his parents, even though he had offered to let them live with him and attend school or college here. His older sister Belle also chose to stay with their parents. Anyway, it had been a few years since he stopped traveling with his family, and now whenever they visited they would nitpick everything he did or didn't do. It was best to meet them outside of New York. "I'm a little busy with work, it's not easy to get a leave. I'll visit you guys as soon as I get the chance." Lex tried to appease his little sister and spent some time catching up with her. Moon was mostly just calling to let him know that the family was missing him, but everyone was a little too proud to admit it. He promised he'd call everyone and take some time to catch up. Eventually he hung up and looked at the time. It was 10:30 p.m. He'd slept for around 3 hours in the tub, but already felt much better. He wasn't at 100%, but he wasn't completely drained like he was when he got home. He ordered himself some pizza and sat on a table and thought about the new world he would be visiting soon. He would be able to use the golden ticket again on Tuesday, and he planned on using it the same day. His preparations were almost complete, but his training today made him realize that he should at least carry some kind of weapon with him in case of an emergency. Buying spirit tech was out of the question, but he should be able to get some kind of weapon from Marlowe during his next class on Monday. Marlowe had mentioned that his students could buy gear from him at a discount if they wished, as he was also a certified trader. A surprising thing Lex learned about Marlowe was that the eager giant was very industrious. He ran multiple businesses and side hustles. Today his formal attire was not because of class, but because he had arrived directly from some kind of meeting. He could also use that opportunity to accidentally drop a hint that Lex was expecting some kind of fortuitous encounter and use that to build some kind of trust with the giant. He would use that as a foundation to somehow slip the giant a key to enter the inn. He hadn't worked out the details yet, but he had a vague plan. "Mary, can you tell me what the process of connecting to another world is like? How will I choose another world, and what will the connecting process be like?" "Sure," said Mary cheerily as she appeared in the air in front of him. "When you tear the golden ticket, you will get a list of a few habitable planets within the inn's current range, with some basic details about the planet, such as the spiritual energy density, what kind of environment to expect, etc. As for the details of what kind of beings inhabit the planet, you will have to find out for yourself when you visit. You can, however, make guesses, such as if the planet has temperatures and spiritual energy similar to Earth, you might find humans, whereas if the conditions are drastically different, then it's almost impossible to find humans." "There are humans on other planets?" Lex asked in surprise. Honestly, he was expecting some kind of aliens. Humans were a species that evolved on Earth as far as he knew, so unless Earth colonized these planets, he was honestly not expecting to see more humans. Bastet and Falak also supported his theory that he would be able to find intelligent aliens on other planets. Checking authority. Surprisingly, you have enough authority to receive this information as it pertains to guests you can receive. In this universe, as long as any species exists for even a moment, the foundations of its existence become a core of the universe. That means, anytime an environment that can support the existence of that species occurs, the laws of the universe naturally propagate its natural birth and creation. That means humans, for example, exist on multiple planets across the universe. However, just because the planet can support the life and existence of humans does not mean all humans have the same traits. Humans born on a planet with higher gravity will eventually evolve to adapt to it. Humans born on a planet that has 99% of its surface covered in water will evolve to be able to breathe underwater. There are numerous examples of this, which means there are various subspecies of humans across the universe. In fact, to you it seems like you are the normal version of humans, but that may not be necessary. Of course, this applies to other races as well. So across the universe you will encounter different versions of some intelligent species, and it is difficult to guess which will be the most common species to be your guests. This may also sometimes lead to conflicts between guests of different species. This is something you need to be aware of and prepare for. "Got it," said Lex. For now his options were limited, so there wasn't really anything to prepare. The range of planets available for you depends primarily on your cultivation. The higher the cultivation, the greater the range. Once you select a planet, you will be transported to that planet, and will act as an anchor for the inn to develop a connection to that planet. The connection building process may take anywhere from 1 day to 1 month to even a year, depending on how far it is. In the beginning, however, the connection process shouldn't be longer than a week at most, as your range is currently very small. Lex nodded, relieved that the process wouldn't take too long. Just to be safe though, he should also think of an excuse to give to Marlowe in case he missed a class. Chapter 19. New Planet, Vegas Minima. Monday morning Lex arrived at Marlowe's apartment bright and early. He lived in a penthouse downtown Manhattan, so it was easy to find. They were all supposed to gather here, and then traveled together to the location for their next training session. It had to do with surviving in the wild, or something of vaguely that nature, as Marlowe had not been specific with the details. Lex, however, arrived an hour earlier than the designated time, as he wanted to talk with Marlowe alone before the other arrived. Lex was let in by someone he could only assume to be a butler, and escorted to where Marlowe was resting. He found Marlowe sitting comfortably in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, with his eyes closed, his feet in a bucket of what Lex could only assume was some kind of elixir, and having his temples rubbed by a rather beautiful woman. She was an older lady, clearly, but her flawless skin and indifferent temperament made it difficult for Lex to guess her age. Could this be Marlowe's wife? "You're early. I'm assuming that's on purpose?" Marlowe asked, though he still kept his eyes closed. His tone and voice were rather normal, which was something Lex was completely not used to, but he did not let this fool him into thinking the giant would not switch to his excitable personality at a moment's notice. He still had to be careful in what he said. "Yes, there were a couple of things I needed to talk to you about." He glanced at the lady massaging him, wondering if it was okay to talk in front of a stranger, but she did not seem like she was going anywhere. Don't be shy, Marlowe said when he noticed Lex pausing. This is my foster mother, she's treating an old wound of mine. You can say what you want in front of her, trust me she doesn't care. The woman continued with her massage, completely indifferent to being talked about, as if to prove Marlowe's point. Lex was shocked. Marlowe was already in his 60s, something Lex knew from when Marlowe introduced himself, yet his mother didn't look old at all. In fact, Marlowe, despite looking very fit and energetic, looks like the older one of the two. Lex suppressed his surprise and focused back on the matter at hand. I need some kind of a weapon, something I can use in case I encounter some trouble, and I need it today. Oh? Marlowe exclaimed in an amused tone. Expecting some kind of trouble are we? That was quicker than I expected, if I'm being honest. When I saw how committed you were to taking a beating in our first class I had a feeling you'd be interesting. It's rare to see someone so committed without adequate motivation spurring them. Marlowe paused for a moment, as if in thought, but then continued, getting a weapon shouldn't be a problem, it all depends on your budget. That's the great thing about America, eh? It's as if people will almost be offended if you don't buy a weapon every now and then. What are you thinking? A gun? A dagger? A rocket launcher? Marlowe's casualness while discussing such matters brought a new kind of pressure on Lex. This guy was way too cool, right? Selling a rocket launcher as soon as someone asked for a weapon? A blade, or something quiet and that won't attract too much attention. While you're at it, some discreet kind of body armor would also be nice if it's available. Anything else? Tactical equipment of some kind? Night vision goggles? No, that's enough. Furthermore, I might not be able to make it to the next class. Although it's unlikely, I thought I should give you a heads up anyway in case I'm not able to make it back in time. Marlowe chuckled, as if Lex had told him a great joke. I'll keep that in mind. I'll be looking forward to your return. It's always disappointing when a student disappears, especially an entertaining one. Lex could almost hear the excitement in Marlowe's voice being suppressed. It was clear the giant wanted to burst into his trademark laughter, but was keeping himself from doing so. It seemed no matter the age, everyone had to behave in front of their mothers. Tuesday Lex found himself resting in a lawn chair at the inn with Velma serving him breakfast early in the morning. The food at the inn really was better than getting home delivery, Lex had discovered, and he enjoyed it every opportunity he got. Occasionally he would still crave the junk food from Earth, and though that could also be made by Velma, there was just something special about home delivery. That was not the focus though for now. Right now Lex was waiting for the system's notification that he could reuse the golden ticket. He was dressed in a tracksuit with a synthetic spirit armor under his shirt, and next to him was his backpack. Strapped to his left leg was a military knife with a spirit formation engraved into it that would allow it to heat up when used, making it easier for it to pierce and slice through things. The knife cost him a heavy $30,000, but that was nothing compared to the $400,000 that the armor cost. The armor could block basic attacks from an early Kai training cultivator, and was great at blocking sharp attacks below that level. He also kept enough rations to survive for a week. Just to be safe, he also bought himself 2 bottles of Botlem Dew in case he got injured. Those he left in the system inventory as they could be stored there. He had already put on the bathroom slippers, the item that would protect him from environmental damage when traveling to a new planet in case he forgot to equip it when he left. His fancy monocle had its database further updated using the Bluebird portal, and he had already equipped that as well. This would be the first time he would be traveling to another world. He would take all the precautions necessary. Finally, after a few hours, he received a system notification. Host can now use the golden ticket. Instantly a golden ticket appeared in his hand and, after appreciating its beauty for a moment, he tore it. Similar to last time the pieces started to shine and disappear, but different from last time a panel appeared in front of him with 2 names on it. Planets available. Planet, Vagus Minima Planet Rating, 1-star planet distance, 3 sectors planet environment, similar to Earth planet, Helios planet rating, 3 stars planet distance, 2 sectors planet environment, extremely hot. Planets connected, planet, Earth planet rating, 0.8 stars planet distance, 0 sectors planet environment, being from Earth. If you still need to read this then you should give up the system and eat tofu at home. Lex's lips twitched. The system could never let a serious matter stay serious. But he ignored the comment and asked Mary, what is this star rating? The star rating is the cultivation environment on the planet. Earth's environment has been greatly damaged for some reason and now can only allow cultivators up to a certain level to grow. A 1-star rating is the average star rating for a planet, while a 3-star rating means that the planet accommodates certain biomass that contain extremely precious materials that can be considered rare treasures. It also has a higher average spirit level and can allow cultivators to grow to a higher level. For reference, the star level of the inn is at 1 star currently. Lex nodded. Currently he could not sense spirit energy, so he could not compare, but he did always feel the environment at the inn was better than on Earth. He returned his attention to the list and looked at his options. The decision seemed pretty easy for now. Choosing Helios seemed dangerous, not only because of the environment, but also because he was more likely to encounter higher-leveled cultivators, ergo he would encounter more danger. Without any further hesitation he put on his backpack and decisively selected Vagus Minima. He was enveloped in a bright, warm light and then disappeared. When he reappeared he found himself on a small hill with dark clouds covering the sky, so he couldn't really see much. The weather, although a little windy, seemed normal and the air fresh. It seemed he wouldn't need the bathroom slippers. While he was looking at his environment and taking everything, his fancy monocle instantly flashed warning. In big bright letters. Threat identified. Exact species, unknown. Closest identifiable match, zombies. What? Blurted Lex. But before he had time to process what the fancy monocle told him, a swarm of zombies appeared before him. They were heading straight for him, and their numbers were not low. Chapter 20. Zombie Slayer. Lex panicked and jumped backwards as fast as he could, quickly transitioning into a run. The hill was covered in tall grass and randomly growing bushes which made it hard for him to run, not to mention the dark, making it difficult for him to see. After running for a few moments, when he looked back he noticed that the zombies were moving pretty slowly, and he had opened up a gap between himself and the swarm. Now, at a distance, he calmed down a little from his initial panic and his brain started working again. Instantly his thoughts went back to the training he had received from Marlowe during their first official training. He had to assess the situation and quickly determine the best course of action for himself. He was in an unknown environment, with hostiles incoming, and he did not know their strength or numbers. The terrain on the hill made it difficult for him to see and move, which admittedly also hindered the zombies, hopefully, but it also prevented him from seeing them coming towards him. He also didn't know if all zombies were all slow as the ones chasing him, or if there were any faster ones. He had to. A hand suddenly gripped his ankle and Lex let out an involuntary scream in fright. He looked down to see a zombie with only an upper torso lying in the grass. With its arm that had gripped him, it was pulling itself closer to bite onto his leg. Lex let out another scream and kicked the zombie on its head, but the zombie's head was harder than he expected and he tripped instead. He started panicking again as he fell, and when he turned to look at his leg he was horrified to find the zombie baring its ugly teeth and chomping down towards his leg. He was frozen in horror. There was too little time, there was nothing he could do. Then nothing. The zombie tried to bite his leg, but couldn't break through his skin. In that moment Lex was flooded with relief, which was instantly followed by wrath. Without any hesitation he drew the knife strapped to his leg, and stabbed the zombie in the skull, instantly killing it. Lex pulled his leg free to observe to see if there was a wound, but all he saw was a hole torn in his tracksuit pants and his leg covered in dirty saliva. That was close. He didn't intend to risk another bite to see if his skin's defense kept up. He had to find his way to a clearing. This tall grass was an excellent place for zombies to hide. The system that had been quiet so far gave out a notification. Sudden quest. Kill 20 zombies before returning to Midnight Inn. Quest status, 0/20 zombies killed. Quest rewards, 1000 MP. Quest failure punishment, none. Lex scoffed and without wasting any time got up and started running again, vigilant this time for any surprise visits from zombies. He liked getting MP, but right now he wasn't willing to take any risks. He kept looking in the distance to see if he could find any signs of habitation. So many zombies definitely meant there was or at least used to be a human settlement nearby. And indeed, after he actively started looking for signs he noticed houses in the distance. Lightning flashed in the sky, followed by a clap of thunder. It seemed like it was going to rain soon, and the sound from the rain should cover the sound of him running, but his visibility would be reduced even further. His foot fell into a pothole he missed in the darkness, and he tripped again. Suddenly Lex felt like forgiving every clumsy character in a horror movie he had ever seen. He was not much better. Focus, he told himself and picked himself back up, ready to run again, only to freeze. 3 zombies slowly walked out in front of him from some bushes. If he hadn't tripped he would have run right into them without realizing. He turned to look behind him to see if he could find a way to run around the zombies, but although he could not see any figures he could hear zombies moving in the dark. He felt conflicted. Should he go try and fight the zombies or look for a different route and risk running into even more of them? When he remembered one of Marlowe's lessons flashed in his mind, hesitation means death. He turned to look at the zombies with a look of determination. He didn't really need to kill them, just bypass them. In a swift motion he took off his backpack and threw it at the zombie closest to him. The zombie was momentarily blinded by the incoming backpack, and then stumbled backwards into the zombie behind when it was hit. Lex took advantage and bolted, grabbing the backpack with his free hand and swung it hard at the final zombie, knocking it over. He took the opportunity to stab the zombie that had fallen down in its head, and quickly ran past the other two that were starting to reorient themselves. The entire interaction from when Lex saw the zombies to when he escaped took maybe 10 seconds, but Lex's heart was beating as if he had just ran a marathon. He was feeling a mix of fear, excitement, and success. But he had only a moment to enjoy the feeling as he noticed more bushes in his path shaking, as if something was trying to go through them. There was no time to waste. He started running towards the buildings at full speed, this time keeping an eye on his footing as well as the obstructions in his path. At this rate he would be able to reach the buildings in a few minutes. As he got closer he noticed a large, broken fence behind which seemed to be roads. It appeared he was in a park. He grinned, he was almost out. Then he came to a screeching halt. Of course his luck couldn't be so perfect. From behind a tree in his path a zombie stepped out and looked at him, as if observing him. This zombie was larger than the ones he had seen before, and its actions seemed to be deliberate instead of instinctual like the previous ones. It was hiding behind a tree, waiting for him, instead of stumbling towards him like the rest, and even now it was holding back its instincts by just standing there and observing him. Lex instantly decided to treat this zombie as if it were stronger than the others, and smarter too. This was definitely an upgrade in danger, but Lex couldn't afford to wait. He had to deal with this zombie in its path right now, lest the ones behind him catch up and surround him. Like last time, Lex took off his backpack in one swift motion and threw it towards the zombie to distract it. But the tactic didn't work. The zombie dodged the backpack and let out a viscous growl as it lurched at Lex. The fight began instantly. Lex did his best to dodge all of the zombie's attacks as he couldn't afford to get scratched, while the zombie blocked all of Lex's attacks with its limbs. With Lex's strength he should have been able to cut through a normal zombie, but the blade would get stuck every time he hit bone. They had only a few exchanges, but every moment Lex felt the pressure building up. If more zombies caught up he would be dead. There's no way he could fight an entire swarm, and this particular zombie was fast enough that if Lex tried to run he would instantly be caught. A dilemma. How should he solve it? What should he do? Lex tried to think of solutions, but all his focus was on dodging the zombie. How was he supposed to do anything else? After a couple more attempts at stabbing the zombie failed, Lex made up his mind. He didn't think about it, he didn't plan it, but instinctively he knew that he couldn't afford to wait any longer and had to take a risk if he wanted to escape. He grabbed the dagger with all his strength as he eyed the zombie, waiting for its next attack. When the attack came, instead of dodging, Lex lunged at the zombie so that its claw would fall on his chest where his synthetic armor could help block the blow, and used all his strength to stab the zombie through the eye. The dagger stabbed the zombie, but at the same time Lex felt its claw smash his chest, blowing the air right out of his lungs and throwing him in the distance. Pain. Sharp pain shot through his chest and he instantly knew that he had broken at least a few ribs. He summoned a bottle of Botlem Dew and drank it, hoping to quickly heal. Much to his chagrin he didn't instantly feel a warm feeling in his chest or his ribs healing, like he read in the novels, but right now he didn't have the time to think about it. He looked at the zombie to find it lying motionless in the ground, his knife sticking out of his skull. With great difficulty he picked himself up, pulled out the knife, picked up his bag, and limped towards the city. He had to hide as quickly as possible. He was not cut out for this zombie slaying business. Chapter 21. Survival. Lex's speed instantly picked up once he exited the park onto the cobblestone road. The style and architecture of the buildings was dramatically different from what Lex was used to on Earth, but he couldn't be bothered with that now. All he cared about was getting to someplace safe. The road, a wide single path cutting through the city, was littered with large rectangular objects Lex could only assume were vehicles, though he saw no tires. There were no windows in the cars either, so he couldn't look through them and didn't know how to open them, so they were automatically disqualified as a hiding place. The buildings, which were only a couple stories high, seemed as if they were cut out of large rocks as they had no joints or seams and most importantly, no doors or windows. How was he supposed to get in? Lex continued limping in the darkness, further and further away from the park. Fortunately there didn't seem to be any living zombies roaming the roads. He said living zombies because the roads seemed to be littered with dead, rotten bodies he could only assume were zombies. That made him feel at ease as that probably meant there were living humans clearing that. A loud crash attracted his attention, which was followed by more banging. It seemed someone was fighting. After thinking for a moment, he slowly started moving towards the sound, doing his best to stay out of sight. If he found a few people he could possibly consider joining them. In the few minutes that he had been walking his pain had reduced, however slight. That at least proved Botlem Dew seemed to be effective, for now. Leaning against the cars for support and cover, he peeked around a corner to see if he could get a view of the fight. What he saw was not humans fighting zombies. Instead, he saw an 8-foot giant monster that looked like it might have once been a lion viciously devouring a small horde of zombies. The zombies, moving with their usual slow pace, gathered around the lion and tried attacking it. They scraped and bit the lion, but seemed to be doing no damage, while the lion casually bit the head of a zombie and seemed to be sucking something out of its body. The already decayed zombie shriveled up before the lion flung it away, crashing it into a nearby car, and bit the next one. Lex was horrified. Then he slowly started moving backwards. Although his steps were already light, he did his best to not make even the slightest bit of noise as he retreated. Every time his backpack would rustle, he would be horrified. This world was too scary. The situation, however, did not seem to be improving. When he turned around, he saw several zombies walking towards the lion from the distance, and he was directly in their path. The loud noise of the fight was too prominent in the silent night. He had to get out of the line of sight immediately. Quickly he changed his direction and walked down a different street, gripping his knife tightly, as if it was the only thing giving him courage. Lightning flashed through the sky again, and the thunder that followed seemed to signal the start of a devastating storm. The rain started spontaneously and fell with such speed and ferocity that it would put a charging army to shame. It was around this time that he finally saw a building with a small portion of the wall collapsed. Thanking his miserable luck finally turning, he stumbled towards the building and entered it. It was completely dark now, and except for the few flashes of lightning occasionally, Lex had no other source of light. He was a little fearful. He didn't want to enter the building without being able to see. What if he walked right into a zombie? It was then, like a revelation from the heavens, that he remembered that he had packed a flashlight. Stumbling through his backpack, he searched for the light and turned it on. Not wanting to attract too much attention in the darkness, he immediately entered the building into what he assumed was once a living room. Broken furniture and shattered glass covered the floor like rubble, and the room showed clear signs of a fight. A few skeletons lay on the ground, broken and dismembered. The one thing the room did not have, however, was a door that led deeper into the house. The people of this world must have had some other way to enter and exit. Lex would have to figure that out somehow. For now, though, he needed rest. Lex stumbled to a corner in the room and dragged the remains of a couch to cover him as he sat to rest out of sight. He closed the torch so as to not attract attention, but remained vigilant in case he discovered zombies coming towards him. The knife was still gripped tightly in his hand. A woman stood nervously in a large drawing room, dressed in a very formal-looking suit, gripping her son's hand tightly. Her son, a small boy who stood beside her, looked around the large room in wonder and awe. Once the child had been in rooms much more lavish than this, but he was young and memories, even a few months old, were too ancient for him, let alone those from further back. His left hand was a little uncomfortable as mother was squeezing too tightly, but he did not say anything as he knew his mother would only do that when she was not feeling well. His mother was often not feeling well these days. She thought he didn't know, but he could tell. He didn't know how to make her feel better, though. He was only a child. Sometimes he would share his cereal with her, or save some candy he got from school to give to her. In his right hand the child was holding a golden key. It was a toy he'd gotten from somewhere, he couldn't remember where, and he really liked it. Holding the key made him feel stronger, and sometimes when he was cold it would keep him warm. He tried to give his mother the key so she would feel better, but she was usually busy with other things. He kept the key with him always, so that when his mother was less busy he could give it to her. While the child was lost in his own thoughts, an old man entered the room with a male nurse helping him walk and a female nurse pulling in Roman 4 pole with a drip that was attached to the man's hand. The old man looked weak, but his eyes were filled with energy as he looked at the woman before him. "Here, my child, it's good to see you, it's good to see you. What an age it's been since we last met. Come closer, let me get a better look at you." The man spoke jovially and waved at the woman to come closer. "I remember your wedding, such a happy day. Much happier times, those," the old man said while reminiscing. "Yes," Hera said softly, trying her best not to let herself think back to then. Her husband had died, along with the rest of her family, and thinking back to happier days brought her more pain than relief. The old man in front of her was not really that old. He was in his late 50s, and at her wedding he had been strong and healthy. A rare disease in recent years had sapped most of his strength, leaving him in his current predicament. He was also an old family friend, the only one so far who had agreed to meet her. It was funny, so many of the people who she used to think were close to her had suddenly become distant after her family died and she was left destitute. Even when this old man, Will, agreed to meet, she was scared he had some ulterior motives. Still, she had no choice but to give it a shot. "This must be young Jimmy. Such a handsome young boy," the old man said, looking at the child. But Jimmy suddenly moved behind his mother, as if hiding from him. Hira smiled weakly at the old man, as if to apologize about the child's behavior, but Will didn't seem to mind and only looked at them fondly. I was very surprised to hear from you. I hadn't heard about your family. I'm sorry to hear about them, the man uttered with a forlorn voice. I would have reached out to you myself if I had known. My health keeps me occupied. I barely meet anybody these days. It's all right, Hira said with some difficulty. You have troubles of your own. Just agreeing to meet with me is a great favor. Nonsense. The old man interrupted. You're like family, child's like family. How could I let you stay out there all alone when I heard about what you're going through? You will stay with me, and I will help you get back on your feet. It's settled. No, that's not. The woman tried to speak. It was not her intention to accept handouts, but the old man would not have it. None of this. No, that's not business, child, none of it. There's not much that this old man can do anymore, but that doesn't mean I will let family suffer out in the world alone. Your father was like my brother, your mother was like my elder sister. How would I face them if they were to find out I let you suffer so much? No, child, you mustn't treat me like an outsider. You must stay and keep this old man company. It's been so gloomy in this house these past few years. Your presence will liven the place up. Hira almost teared up, though she controlled herself quickly. The old man was insistent and stubborn, but she felt from him a caring warmth she hadn't in a long time. The child, who had been listening to everything so far, kept looking between the old man and his mother. It seemed like they would be living with him now, and somehow that made his mother happy. The child thought for a bit, then slowly crept out from behind his mother and approached the scary-looking old man. He was skinny and wrinkly and had veins showing all over his body, but he was a good guy if he could make his mother happy. Finally, he held up the golden key to the old man and mumbled, "For you." The old man was taken aback by the shy child's gesture, but smiled and reached out to take the golden key. When he touched the key, though, he was rocked to his very core as he stared at it in horror and excitement. Chapter 22. Riss. Hira noticed the old man's body tremble, his pale face regain color and his weakness change into strength. Immediately she knew something had happened. She signaled Jimmy to hand over the key and quickly pulled him back to her side, but the old man didn't seem to notice. All of his attention was focused on the key that was now in his hand, and the subtle warmth that spread into his body. How many years? The man mumbled to himself. How many years has it been? In fact, the man did not need to wonder, as he could probably recall down to the exact minute how long it had been since he last felt the comforting warmth of spiritual energy course through his body. He broke from his reverie and looked at Hira and Jimmy with immeasurable excitement and glee before asking, "Where did you get this? Do you know what it is?" Hira looked at the key and tried to recall. She had no memory of it, except that she had seen her son holding it whilst he slept at the apartment. Where could he have gotten it from except from there? Isn't it just a key? It was in the apartment when I moved in. It probably belonged to my father. He was the only one who ever lived there before. In your apartment? The last bit of your inheritance, I assume? Will asked, his smile growing as though he suddenly understood something. Here, child, have a seat. We have some business to discuss. The old man sat comfortably, gripping the key tightly in his right hand, while he asked his nurse to make a call to his lawyer. While they waited, the old man's home staff served refreshments, and they all made small talk, though no one was too interested at the moment. The old man was clearly distracted by the key, while Hira was very curious as to what Will was thinking. She had no money and resources. If the key was something valuable, the old man could take it, and there was no way for her to fight back. He could even say the key was repayment for him taking care of her, but the old man insisted that business was business and family was family. The two should not mix. 20 minutes later, his lawyer finally came, along with an entire team of important-looking people, all with their laptops in hand, ready to work at a moment's notice. Hira dear, you must be confused, so let me explain the situation first. This key, the old man said, holding up the golden key in his hand, is more than it appears. In the hands of someone who does not understand its value, it is simply a trinket. However, in my hands it instantly becomes something of inestimable value. To be exact, currently even I cannot accurately determine what its value should be. Determining that will take time and research. Despite that, I want to purchase it from you. I have two propositions for you. You can pick the one you think is more suitable for you. First, I can pay you a total sum of $100 million to purchase it from you. After that I will become the owner, and whether the key ends up being more or less valuable has nothing to do with you. Second, I can pay you an initial sum of $1 million and then take my time to determine its exact value before paying you that amount. This way it could end up being more than $100 million, or it could be less. The risk is yours to take. The lawyer and his team had immediately opened their laptops and started working whilst the old man talked, and even now, the environment was suddenly so drastically different Hira was not able to acclimate. She shook her head and looked at the old man in slight confusion. Uncle Will, if you didn't tell me about it I would never even know there's anything special about the key. You could have just taken it and I would not have said anything. Why did you tell me? The old man chuckled when he heard Hira's question, and looked at the girl with a look of endearment. I'm an old man on the verge of death. What value does money have for me? 1 million or 100 million, neither will keep me from dying, nor will they affect how I live my life. You, on the other hand, still have a long life ahead of you and a son to take care of. This money will seriously affect you every day for the rest of your life. This decision will follow every other decision you will make for the rest of your life. How can I lack this little bit of virtue and steal from you, who is like my own daughter? You should make the decision you think is best for you and your child. Hira heard the old man's words and felt moved. Her life had been so miserable recently, and she did not see any brightness in her future coming soon. But now everything felt so different. She looked at her son, tears forming in her eyes again, and the child looked back at her. It's very nice, the child mumbled, telling his mother about the key. It keeps me warm. Hira nodded, as if understanding what the child was trying to tell her. She hugged the child as she was filled with determination. Since this opportunity was brought to her by her son, she would listen to him and take a risk with $1 million. The sound of thunder woke Lex up, who had not realized at all he had fallen asleep. Fortunately, nothing bad happened while he was dozing off. Instead, his chest felt much better and all his pain was gone. He also felt more clear-headed now that he had time to gather his wits and wasn't constantly trying to survive. He was most surprised to discover that instead of feeling fear or panic, he was feeling excitement. The heart-pumping, adrenaline-filled adventure that he had felt more enjoyable than anything he had ever done. Obviously at the time he was taken by surprise and didn't have the time to think of anything else, but now it was different. It was only now that he felt like he was in the cultivation world, and that he felt most alive when he was fighting for his life. He had to survive long enough to connect this world to the inn, and he could do so by hiding and surviving off of the stuff he had in his backpack, but he no longer felt like hiding in the dark till he could escape. He pulled up his quest menu and took a look. Quests. New quest. As the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Remark. Keep working hard. If you raise your cultivation high enough, one day you'll be able to cast illusions to make yourself look better. Quest. With a great personality and abundant energy, Marlowe is a great candidate to serve as a valet for the inn. Hire Marlowe as your first valet. Quest time limit. 1 month 6/30 days quest reward. 1 small staff dormitory, 1000 MP, plus 1 Midnight Inn level quest failure punishment, minus 1000 MP if host is unable to pay, it will result in immediate death. Sudden quest, kill 20 zombies before returning to Midnight Inn. Quest status, 2/20 zombies killed quest rewards, 1000 MP quest failure punishment. None. He had killed 2 zombies while escaping the park since he had received the quest, and had 18 more to go. Lex grinned with excitement. He could envision himself sneaking in the dark like a ninja, stealthily killing zombies. But he was not a man who did things in a rush, he had to be prepared first. He opened his backpack and took out a few granola bars to fill himself up. Fighting, running, and then healing must have exhausted his body even if he could not feel it yet. He collected rain water in an empty water bottle he had and drank some to rehydrate himself. Finally, he took off his shirt and armor to get a better look at his chest and assess his condition. He had no bites or scratches anywhere, so there was no chance of infection, but his chest was mostly pink and purple, even after all that healing. The bruises ached, but he could tell that his bones at least weren't hurt anymore. He assessed his equipment, and other than his knife he only had a Swiss Army knife which barely gave him an advantage in combat. The fire starter would be useless in the rain, so the only thing he could use to help him was his fancy monocle and flashlight. That suddenly reminded him of his fancy monocle, and how he had manually set it to only show him data he thought was relevant because otherwise it showed too much data, but the monocle could not always determine what was relevant. He had the monocle analyze the entire building, and give him all the details. The building was made of igneous rock, the furniture of some kind of wood, and there were pieces of identifiable metals all around. The rain water was normal and everything seemed to be ordinary. The monocle discovered no secret entrance hidden in the walls or some mechanism to make a door appear. Lix felt it was a pity, but it was probably because it had not yet had access to any kind of database from this world yet. Regardless, there was nothing more he could do at the moment to prepare. Now was the time to actually go out and take some risks. Lex grinned. It was time to kill some zombies. Chapter 23. Exciting life of a rookie assassin. To a degree, Lex had become used to the darkness and could make out vague shapes in the distance. The constant rain made it difficult for him to hear any walking zombies, but similarly, it stopped them from hearing him as well. Lex's eyes gleamed with excitement as he confirmed everything was set, and stepped out of the building to begin his hunt. First and foremost, he would not hunt anywhere near the building he was in. He was treating that as his home base and didn't want to risk attracting a horde near it. Secondly, he moved in the opposite direction from where he saw the giant lion that was an enemy he wasn't yet ready to face. He carefully memorized his path as he moved further and further away, crouching behind the cars as he surveyed the city. Similar to what he encountered previously, all the zombies along his way were dead bodies on the ground. It took him a decent amount of time before he finally encountered a few. 3 of them were standing in a daze staring towards a certain building. They were dripping wet from the rain, though that did not seem to bother them. Lex watched them for a while, but they didn't move. Either they knew there was prey in that building, or they were just standing there, waiting till they heard an indication of life from anywhere. When he was certain they wouldn't move, he thought about how he should attack them, and repeated the movements in his head a few times. When he was certain, he moved towards the zombie closest to him without hesitation. In one swift movement he grabbed it by the neck and stabbed it through the base of the skull. The zombie died just like that, without any struggle or noise. Carefully, Lex laid the body down on the ground and moved swiftly towards the other 2 zombies. They were standing side by side, so it would be difficult to kill one without alerting the other, so this time Lex didn't bother trying. He repeated the maneuver from last time, grabbing the zombie's neck and stabbing it in the skull, but instead of laying the body on the ground, Lex threw the body at the other zombie. The last zombie was knocked over, and before it could do anything, Lex stomped hard on its head, killing it instantly. The whole affair was complete in less than 10 seconds, but Lex's heart was beating like a drum, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The entire process was flawless. He couldn't think of a way he could have performed better. These zombies were normal slow ones, and Lex called them regulars. Regulars seemed easy to kill so long as they weren't in a large group. It was the one he faced in the park at the end, mini-boss as Lex had temporarily named it. That was tough. Appearance-wise, the mini-boss didn't look too different from regulars, but its actions were distinct and driven with purpose. Lex wanted to avoid those if possible. He was not yet good enough at combat to be confident enough to defeat it every time they fought. As for the lion beast, the big boss, that Lex wanted to avoid at all costs. He had no idea how strong it was, but Lex didn't doubt that he would certainly die if he fought it. He inspected the 3 zombies to see if he could find anything on their bodies that could tell him more about this world, but alas, there was nothing. There were barely any clothes, so how could he expect to find anything else? Ignoring his disappointment, he continued on his journey to hunt. After searching for a short while, he found another group. This time, however, there were many of them bunched together moving randomly through the street. There were too many of them, and he thought he should avoid them, yet fate had other plans. He heard barking, and suddenly from the horde 2 zombified dogs came bolting towards him. For a moment Lex was filled with panic, an instinctual reaction, but he quickly overcame it and stared at the 2 dogs. He absolutely had to kill them. He couldn't risk letting them bite at him at all. His heartbeat accelerated as he watched the 2 dogs run towards him, and his body trembled with nervous energy. The dogs lurched at him, and in a split second he knew they were too close to one another. If he tried attacking one, he would in turn be attacked by the other. He jumped and rolled to his side, dodging them, but reached a building with no more room to go that way. Before the dogs could turn and attack him again, he launched himself at them, not wasting any time. Attacking their skull with the knife put him too close to their mouth. He didn't want to risk it, so he kicked the first dog as hard as he could on its body, trying to disable it. The first dog was thrown away, but the second one used this time to turn and attack Lex. Once again he jumped and rolled away, feeling slightly like a character from a certain, extremely difficult video game he played. Any guesses? To dodge the dog's attack. From the corner of his eye he noticed that the horde of zombies had started moving towards him. He didn't have time to waste. He kicked the second dog and turned to look at the first one. It was still coming at him, but was limping now, so it had slowed down considerably. Lex grinned. It seemed he wasn't so bad at this. He attacked the first dog again, and this time he kicked it on its head. The dog tried to bite at his leg, but Lex was too fast. With that last attack the dog's neck cracked, and it became completely disabled, though it was still alive and staring viciously at Lex. With decent practice, he did the same to the second dog, which died instantly when he kicked its head. There was no time to celebrate though. The horde was almost upon him. This time, Lex decided to retreat. Though the regulars were very weak, they had a great advantage in numbers which Lex could not overcome. Not to mention, if a mini-boss was hiding in the horde, Lex would be a goner. Better to run and fight another day. In the dark, with Lex's great running speed, and the roaring of the rain covering the sound of his footsteps, he quickly lost the horde. He took some time to rest this time, not wanting to jump straight into another fight. He wasn't tired, but he didn't have a complete grasp of his body's new stamina and didn't want to risk fatigue in his next fight. After 15 minutes of sitting in the shade, away from the rain, he continued his search. Fortunately, his body had become very resistant to the cold, otherwise he would have gotten sick from being in the rain so long. This time, he found zombies fairly quickly. They were in a large horde, much larger than he had ever seen, and they were moving together all in the same direction at their usual pace. He didn't even need a moment to deliberate. Lex retreated and went in the opposite direction. But it was only a few minutes later he found another group of zombies, this time only 4, but they seemed to be heading in the same direction as the larger group. Something was clearly happening, and Lex didn't want to risk his life to find out. Immediately he decided to give up going back to his home base and started moving in the opposite direction to where all the zombies were going. A couple of times he saw some lone zombies limping down a street and used the opportunity to kill them, bringing his quest total to 8/20. Everything was going smoothly until it wasn't. He heard a loud roar from the direction the zombies were going towards, shaking the city itself with its might, which was followed by a series of loud crashing noises. Someone, or something, was fighting a tough fight and it was making a lot of noise. For a moment Lex was grateful he decided to move away, but then the buildings around him started emitting a soft blue light in the shape of an archway. From within the buildings came out zombies who initially seemed to be attracted to the noise, but quickly caught sight of Lex. Bloody hell! Lex cursed as he started sprinting as fast as he could. Mary, how much longer till I can leave this world? Lex roared in his mind as he kept running. The zombies behind him were already a safe distance away, but new zombies kept exiting buildings around him. He needed to get to a clearing as fast as possible. You've only been in this world for 6 hours, Mary said sympathetically. You have at least 18 more hours to go with the possibility of more. Bloody hell. Lex swore once again and promised himself he would never again wish for more excitement in his life. This was too much excitement. Chapter 24. Awakening. Lex picked up his speed and tried to run past the zombies before they noticed him. For the ones who came out as he was running past he was successful, but there were many times where zombies had already exited buildings as he ran past. They would always be attracted to him and start moving in his direction. Initially he was still able to dodge them, but as time went by he had to preemptively start attacking them. Killing zombies wasn't his goal with these attacks. With one look he determined his optimal escape path, then stabbed or tripped any zombies in or near his path, turning them into a hindrance to the zombies behind them. Quick and efficient. Those 2 words could describe his actions at that moment. At first it was just a couple that would come his way, but the horde slowly grew. The once empty streets were filling up with the walking dead. Under normal circumstances Lex would be panicking once again, but unbeknownst to him, he had entered an extremely focused state. When 2 zombies would approach him from the front he would slash the first one's neck and push it towards the other with his body, acting too fast for the zombie to scratch or bite him. When more zombies came his way he would quickly duck and slash the zombie's thighs, making it trip, creating an obstacle for the zombies behind to slow them down. Lex didn't know, but slowly and steadily, even though he didn't mean to, his zombie kill counter was increasing. This was because often when slashed the neck he started cutting the head clean off, and other zombies would then stampede over the head, killing it. In barely a few minutes he completed the 20 kills, and the quest was updated, but Lex remained completely unaware. This was because by now he was almost completely surrounded. Giving up trying to run, he climbed up onto one of the cars. On an instinct he instructed the fancy monocle to collect data on how the blue light doors that the zombies were coming from worked, and updated him when it discovered something. The car was rectangular and around 8 feet high and almost 15 feet long, which gave Lex a decent amount of space to maneuver. But he didn't have time to think further. Zombies were climbing up behind him. He kicked a zombie hard on its chest, flinging it away into the zombie behind it, knocking them all down, but there was no respite. Behind him he felt a zombie cling onto his shoulders and attempt to bite him, but before it could he elbowed it to push it away. He turned, stabbed it through the eye and moved on to the next zombie as if it were nothing. By this point he could no longer continue to dodge scratches. On his chest, his arms, his legs, everywhere zombies had tried to scratch him, but fortunately so far it seemed they were unable to break through his skin, but repeated attempts might still be able to pierce through. That's not to say he was unhurt. His body was covered in bruises both old and new, but he felt neither. Even his synthetic armor started to show signs of wear, but in the dark, rainy night who was paying attention to that? Slowly, his efficiency improved even further. He used the momentum from one attack to flow into another, turning from his rigid, repetitive motions to smooth, flowing ones. When he saw an attack coming he could not avoid, he would try to catch it on his chest so his underarmor could protect him. He got another notification from the system. but it was ignored just the same. The monocle gave him a notification, but as if it were an unnecessary distraction, Lex ignored it. Lex was now a killing machine. With his right hand he would stab, and with his left hand he would use his index and middle finger to stab zombies through the eyes. It was not something he consciously thought of, it was something that he naturally started doing. A pile of bodies had fallen on the ground around the car, which had built a path for zombies to climb up, which only increased the pressure on him. While this was happening, Lex was mowing through anything that approached him, his clothes ripped to shreds and his backpack lost somewhere along the way. He was covered in sweat and the spilled blood of his enemies. A zombie approached him slowly from the back, waiting to catch him off guard. It studied him, studied his attack patterns, and slowly crawled towards him. It was mixed in with the dead undead bodies on the floor so as to not attract attention to itself. Lex turned his back towards the zombie to attack in the other direction, and the zombie immediately launched itself at him. In one quick jolt it had gone from the ground to almost on top of Lex, and just when it thought it was about to reach him, Lex moved. Spinning on his heel, Lex avoided the zombie's lurch and swiped at its neck with his knife, using its own momentum to cut its neck. From start to finish, Lex had not even seen the zombie. To him it was just a single moment between so many other intense moments. But he would be surprised to know that this was the third mini-boss zombie he had dispatched so effortlessly, whereas he had struggled so much with it before. Somewhere along the way Lex lost his knife too. It broke or got stuck or was pulled from his hand, he could not remember, but he had lost it. That had not slowed him down though. His punches delivered a devastating blow to the zombies' skulls, his fingers piercing though as if daggers, and his kicks launched zombies far away as if they were shot through a cannon. He had awakened a primal side of him he had never known. His brain was working faster than he had ever thought possible, and his actions followed almost as quickly as he thought of something. In this life or death moment, Lex had completely let his instincts take over, and if the Mad Marlowe were to look at him now, it would be up for debate which one of them was the mad one. The downside of such feral fighting was that he had become completely numb and so did not notice that along with battered bruises, his body was slowly starting to be covered in cuts and scratches. Lex quickly hid. He suddenly heard a roaring sound in his head and he recognized it as Mary. Before he could ask her what happened, he noticed a red warning flashing on his monocle, pointing towards his left. When he turned to look, his pupils shrunk and he was filled with horror. The giant mutated lion was rushing in his direction, being chased by what looked like a giant 10 feet tall zombie. Lex didn't need any more motivation. He jumped as far off from the car as he could and launched into a sprint. Approach the center of a building and put your hand flat against the wall, Mary instructed urgently, and Lex obeyed, not wasting time on questions. To his great delight, as soon as he did so, a blue light formed on the wall and he ran through. As soon as he crossed, he turned his attention to listen to the sounds outside. The lion and giant zombie seemed to pass right beside the building and crossed it. Lex waited a few more moments to ensure they had passed. When he was assured, he asked the monocle how to lock the door, and followed the instructions, after which he took a look around the room to see if there were any zombies. The room appeared to have been a lounge once. Sofas were arranged neatly around a table and various decorations filled the room. A few plants that had seemed to have overgrown let out a soft, green light, illuminating the room, creating a pleasant environment. Lex, however, had no time to appreciate any of that. When he finally found there were no zombies, he collapsed onto the nearest couch. He was thoroughly exhausted. He had lost all his supplies and his clothes had been ripped to the point that he was practically nude. Without thinking too much, he pulled out the second bottle of Bottlem Dew from the system and moved his aching hand to deliver it to his mouth, a simple action that had suddenly become immensely painful as soon as he let himself relax. Once he drank the bottle, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. He was completely mentally and physically exhausted. He did not know it, but he had spent nearly 3 hours continuously fighting zombies. His body was completely black and blue, and his originally pristine and flawless skin could not be differentiated from an old piece of beaten leather. If he had known how bad his condition really was, he would have panicked, but the last time he had checked his body, the zombies had been unable to pierce his skin, so he thought he was still safe. If he had known how many scratches his body had sustained, he would have assumed that he was infected, which he was, for a short time, but a closer examination of his wounds would show tiny droplets of Bottlem Dew killing off even tinier black, wriggling spores. Unwittingly, he had saved himself. Even Mary did not notice, as she was not able to view the status of his body. She just appeared in the air and watched him sleep, worry painted across her tiny face. "You can't die, not yet," she whispered, her thoughts completely unknown. Chapter 25. Epiphany. When Lex finally woke, the first thing he became aware of was pain. His entire body, from his toes to his head, was filled with pain. He was also incredibly sore, and that was a feeling he had barely felt since he started cultivating Regal Embrace. With difficulty he got up, and all his bones cracked as he did. When he got up he was hit with a sudden bout of nausea and leaned to the side of the sofa to let out pitch-black vomit. Lex was horrified looking at it, but he suddenly felt much better once he was done. Other than the constant pain, the soreness and the weakness that filled his entire being, Lex felt pretty great. Shaking his head, he got up and moved to a different corner of the room to get away from the smell. He looked at his completely bruised, almost bare body and was honestly impressed. Not a single cut was visible. Regal Embrace really lived up to its claim of having the best defense in the universe, even at this level. Previously when he had Botlam, it had almost completely healed and reinvigorated him, compared to this time when he was clearly still pretty badly hurt. It was a testament to how miserable his condition must have been. He opened up the system to buy another bottle of Botlam, but froze when he saw the list of notifications. Quest completed. 20/20 zombies killed. Quest reward, 1000 MP delivered. Quest updated, kill 50 zombies before returning to inn. Quest reward, 1500 MP. Quest completed, 50/50 zombies killed. Quest reward, 1500 MP delivered. Quest updated, kill 100 zombies before returning to inn. Quest reward, 2000 MP. Quest completed, 100/100 zombies killed. Quest reward, 2000 MP delivered. Quest updated, kill 5 rank 2 zombies before returning to inn. Quest reward, 5000 MP. Quest status, rank 2 zombies killed. He read the notifications multiple times before he could accept what was written. He had unwittingly earned 4500 MP and that was amazing. But he had killed over 100 zombies. Honestly, he didn't even recall what happened. When he thought back, he could only remember flashes. He remembered feeling sweaty, he remembered feeling pain from being hit, he remembered feeling that his body was extremely hot. At some point, he was on top of a car. He had lost track of his backpack, his knife and most of his clothes. He vaguely remembered telling the monocle if it could figure out how the blue light doors worked when it saw zombies coming out of buildings, and at some point it must have done that. He remembered the giant line running. He remembered Mary's warning. "Mary, are you there?" He croaked. His throat was very dry and his voice was barely audible. "I'm here," she said, appearing in front of him. She was floating in the air before him, looking down at his beaten body with sympathy. "You did really well. Who could have guessed your first trip to another world would be so dangerous?" Lex chuckled. He had anticipated many things when he thought of what he could encounter on another planet: hostile civilizations, primitive life forms, aliens, but he never considered zombies. "How much time is left before I can leave?" he asked her, this time using his thoughts. "It's been 21 hours since you've been on his planet. 3 more hours before the minimum time required, and it could be any amount of time after that. I suggest you get as much rest as you can, in case it takes much longer. You've lost your food, so if it takes much longer than 24 hours for you to be able to go back, you might have to think of something. If I can continue hiding, I'll just buy Saturn cake from the midnight store. It's expensive, but I'm in no condition to continue fighting. Anyway, I've earned quite a few MP. Did I really kill that many zombies?" For a moment Mary just looked at Lex with a complicated expression on her face. "You killed quite a few zombies, but you've overexerted yourself. You lost yourself in combat, which was very dangerous. You could have easily escaped much earlier, but you were so focused on fighting that you completely forgot about everything else. In the future, try to maintain your self-awareness at all times." Lex was startled. He was under the impression that he had done really well, but Mary's lecture reminded him that his primary purpose wasn't to kill zombies. He should have only fought as long as needed. Instead, he got caught up in a cycle of acting without thinking because the situation was too intense. As a result, he was not thoroughly exhausted. "I'll keep that in mind," he said as he moved to buy another Botlam finally, but right before he made the purchase he had an idea. He had an idea for how to solve another problem he had been having. "Mary, how do I recruit Marlowe as a valet?" he asked. "You can purchase an employment key from the Midnight Store. It's a platinum key you can give to someone, who can then use it to enter Midnight Inn. There they can view an employee contract that details their responsibilities, based on their job, and if they accept they will become your employee. You must also give them a test to complete before they can officially join, as becoming an employee of the Midnight Inn should not be a leisurely task. Once you have an employee you will also have to provide them with an employee residence. The employee can choose to live in the residence permanently or travel back and forth between their world and the inn, but either way they must have one. The employee can also never harm you in any world, but you can also not harm an employee or ask them to perform a task that will kill them. You can only give them orders related to the position they are filling, and anything else you tell them to do will be a request that they can turn down if they so wish. You also have to pay the employee an MP, and their salary will be based on their cultivation level as well as position and result during the test. If you are unable to pay your employee, at the end of every month the system will instantly kill you. There is no such thing as credit when it comes to the system. Right now you only have basic positions open to fill, such as valet, but later on you can recruit better and more skilled employees such as pill refiners, blacksmiths, spirit array refiners, and more to provide the best services to your guests. Lex understood the basics, and it was more or less as he expected it to be. Slowly a plan formed in his mind, but enacting the plan would depend on when he would be able to return to the inn. He closed his eyes and rested while he waited for the last 3 hours to pass. Normally his body was very quick to recover since he cultivated regal embrace. This was the first time his feeling of weakness persisted. He checked his status mentally and was shocked at the state his body was in, especially since this was after he had drunk Botlemdu. Name: Lex Williams. Age: 23. Sex: male. Cultivation level: regal embrace. Body tempering. Stage 1 health: suboptimal. Developing brain tumor, severe muscle damage recovering, severe exhaustion recovering, multiple hairline fractures recovering. Midnight points: 5,331. Midnight Inn level 2. Inventory: bathroom slippers, self-defense butter knife, 1 golden tickets, host attire quests. New quest: as the most renowned inn in the universe, the Midnight Inn does not only host the rich and the powerful. Set up and develop the pro bono wing of the inn and accept your first pro bono guest. Remark: keep working hard. If you raise your cultivation high enough, one day you'll be able to cast illusions to make yourself look better. Sudden quest: with a great personality and abundant energy, Marlowe is a great candidate to serve as a valet for the inn. Hire Marlowe as your first valet. Quest time limit: 1 month. Quest reward: 1 small staff dormitory, 1000 MP, plus 1 Midnight Inn level. Quest failure punishment: minus 1000 MP. If host is unable to pay, it will result in immediate death. Lex rested with his eyes closed, though he was not able to fall asleep due to the pain. He waited patiently for his 24 hours to be complete, and prayed for the inn to connect the worlds as soon as possible. Fortunately, his luck was good and he got the notification. Midnight Inn update: World Vegas minima connected. Access available. Quests completed before connection. 3 rating. See host reward. Serene whistle. Trials. Lex didn't have the patience to go through his reward right now. He was in too much pain for goodness sakes. He could tolerate it if he had to, but he had no intentions of prolonging it. He quickly left Vegas minima and returned to Earth. He threw on some random clothes and hailed a cab to Marlowe's apartment. He did his best to make himself look as miserable as possible, which wasn't very hard to be honest, as he was still covered in dried black blood from the zombies and smelled like death. He rang the bell for Marlowe's apartment, and when the butler answered the door he gave one look at Lex and delivered an annoyed look rather than a surprised one. "I will summon the master," the butler said, escorting Lex to the least luxurious part of the apartment, a bathroom. Marlowe appeared quick enough and his face was plastered with the largest grin Lex had ever seen, and his eyes were practically screaming with excitement. "I had an epiphany about self-defense," Lex said weakly as he chuckled. "Giving up an opportunity that's too dangerous for you is also a form of self-defense." Before he could explain further, the behemoth of a man before him burst into a roaring laughter.